Of the Planning Board happening November 5th, 2020. The opening statement is as follows. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the 2020 resolution of the regularly scheduled meetings of the Planning Board, Princeton. A copy was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 8th day of December 2019. Legal notice on the adoption of said resolution appeared in the December 20th, 2019 edition of the Princeton Packet. Notice of this meeting has been filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 8th day of April and has been posted to the municipal website, princetonnj.gov/meetings. Pursuant to Executive Order 107, due to the state of emergency in New Jersey regarding COVID-19, notice that during the declared state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Planning Board will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, and the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 8th day of April 2020. Such notices have been placed on the official bulletin board at the Princeton Municipal Complex and on the Princeton website and are to be maintained throughout the year. Notices have also been placed on all windowed doors of the municipal complex. Members of the general public, please note that as with regular in-person meetings, members of the public will have an opportunity at specific points in the proceedings to comment and ask questions. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded. Those wishing to comment orally should virtually raise your hand using the button at the bottom center of your Zoom screen, or if you are participating by phone, by pressing *9. If you're having difficulty accessing that raise hand feature, use the Q&A dialog box for assistance. Oral comments will be taken in the order in which hands were raised. For those who do offer comments, we ask that you please do your best to keep your comments to roughly 3 minutes or less, and that you activate the camera on your device so that the board and other meeting participants and attendees may see you. If you don't know how to do that, we can guide you through it. If you're speaking about an application as opposed to a concept plan, our attorney, Mr. Mueller, will swear you in and ask you to state your name, spell your last name for the record, and tell us where you live, and then you may offer your testimony. Inappropriate public comment containing obscenity, hate speech, or relating to matters not before the board will be muted. In the unlikely event this should happen, the person who had to be muted will be moved to the back of the line and allowed to speak again, provided he or she is civil. That's it. Carrie, would you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, certainly. Ms. Capizzoli,
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Cohen,
Here.
Mr. McGowan,
Here.
Mr. Quinn,
Here.
Ms. Sachs,
Here.
Mr. Texarney,
Here.
Mr. Chow,
Here.
and Mrs. Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. See, the opening statement is so long that it gave everyone time to find their way into the meeting.
Actually, I'll just mention, Madam Chair, I just got an email from Owen that he was having trouble getting in. I sent him my link, so
Okay,
with
all
us
right.
shortly.
We'll note when he gets here and he'll be marked present. Announcements. We have a special meeting of the Planning Board happening Tuesday, November 17th. And at that, the items on that agenda, I think, are the Pearl project and the J. McLaughlin sign variance. I don't know that there's anything else on that agenda, but there may be like ordinance referrals perhaps, because I know we have several of them coming down the pike. Are there any other announcements?
Madam Chair, I just would like to point out to Carrie that there are a couple of the professionals for the applicant waiting as attendees, Brett Skapinitz and Dan Schnell. are in the attendees list and not on the panelists
I
list.
will bring them over as soon as we begin.
Thank you.
Okay, and has Owen, oh, there you are.
I
Owen,
have, I'm sorry, I just got here.
oh, that's all right. Carrie, can you change Owen's name on his screen to,
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
okay. There's no other announcements. We'll move on to the resolution. This is Brook Brown's minor subdivision at 145 Ewing Street, block 31.05, lot 86, file number P 2020-856MS. And I think we're all familiar with this application. Is there anything you want to say about it, Michael or Jerry, or do we just move straight into somebody?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. As you recall, it's a subdivision creating two lots. And one of the happy outcomes was that a 18th century farmhouse is being preserved and incorporated into the new development. Not much to say. The resolution expresses everything that was discussed at the meeting.
Right.
So I move to approve.
Julie
I
Capizol
second.
moved and Mr. McGowan seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Next on the agenda is the continuation of the application, Princeton Thanet Road Urban Renewal LLC, continued from October 22nd. This is preliminary and final major site plan and subdivision, 100-101 Thanet Road, block 5002, lot 4, file number P 2020-87, 879P/SPF. And the expiration date, if you will, is January 9th, 2021. I guess there's not a question of proper notice and jurisdiction, is there? That's been settled?
Yes, yeah, the board already has jurisdiction.
Okay. Michael, you want to get us started?
Madam Chair, if I could just very briefly, Peter Flannery, for the record, Ms.
Sure, Mr.
Gerhoff, on behalf of the applicant. This, of course, is a continuation of the hearing from October 22nd. There were some housekeeping items I thought I'd just briefly mention before we proceed, if that's okay with Madam Chair.
Sure.
Thank you. First of all, there was a matrix of the unit sizes which was submitted, just confirming that the proposed unit sizes meet all the ordinance requirements in terms of unit size. And there are no variances associated with this application, as was discussed at the last board hearing. There were also proposed colors and materials prepared by the applicant's architect, Mr. Bradford, which were submitted, and we intend to discuss and present this evening. The engineers on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Scapinet, met with Mr. Purcell, or by conference call with Mr. Purcell and Mr. Scupian to resolve the remaining, or at least have a path forward for the stormwater issues. There was a second letter submitted in response to Mr. Scupian's review letter, and we'll have the applicant's engineer here tonight to discuss the stormwater issues as well. There also was a request by Mr. Mueller for just a clarification from the applicant's landscape architect, Mr. Carmen, regarding the calculations for the shade trees, establishing that the entire tract, the Pearl and the Thanet development would have exceed the shade tree requirements in the Princeton ordinance. That was submitted as well. And speaking of Mr. Carmen, I believe we left off, we had concluded all testimony for all of our witnesses. including public questions, except for Mr. Carmen. I think we technically still have to close public questioning of Mr. Carmen. I believe, if the board will recall, Ms. Perot had a question regarding lighting and her computer died. And I don't know if she's here tonight, but it might be worth just having Mr. Carmen address that comment. And then if there are no further public questions, we can close Mr. Carmen's testimony, and then we can move on to just limited testimony from Mr. Bradford on the colors materials, and then limited testimony from Mr. Scapinetz on the new stormwater developments.
My recollection is that I'm not arguing with anything you just noted of the things that we need to cover. My recollection is that the applicant was going to describe for the board the ways in which it is going above and beyond what code requires with regard to fire safety.
Certainly, Madam Chair, and I can represent those. I have a list. In terms of fire suppression systems that will exceed current code requirements, for the 3 to 4 story buildings, we will utilize the NFPA 13 suppression system. For the townhome buildings, we will utilize the 13R suppression system, which is above the required 13D system. In terms of construction, there'll be a firewall separation required within the building. Utilize masonry firewalls, which are not required by code, that will extend to the roof of the structure. In terms of protocols during construction, there will be no open flame heating sources utilized. And there'll also be, the buildings will contain a heat detection monitoring system, such as pillar technologies, which will monitor the entire structure for various items, including temperature, moisture, light, and carbon monoxide. I think that's essentially a summary of those measures that the applicant will undertake.
Okay. I know that there are people who are interested in testifying this evening that may bring us back to this topic, but I'll wait until then, you know, to let people pose their own questions.
Certainly.
So do we want to go back to Mr. Carmen now then? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think if we could proceed with Mr. Carmen, have him answer any questions from the public on his testimony from the last hearing. And he was previously sworn and qualified, of course, at the last hearing.
Okay.
And
am I missing anything, Mr. Mueller?
No, no.
Okay, I trust you would be waving your hand or something. Okay. Thanks. Welcome, Mr. Carmen.
Good evening. It's good to see everybody again. So this evening, there are just 2 items that I wanted to address. As Mr. Flannery had indicated at the end of the October 22nd meeting, Mr. Mueller had asked that we just document the numbers related to the tree replacement. And we did issue out a November 3rd memo. It was a response to the Shade Tree Commission's review letter. And in there, we went through all the numbers and identified that at the completion of both the Avalon Bay and the Pearl landscape installation, we would, at a minimum, be over the required mount by 18 trees. The second item to just touch on here is, as at the end of the meeting, there was a member of the public who did have a question related to the site lighting. And as I had testified, we do have a very responsible lighting plan, utilizes LED fixtures to minimize glare, dark sky, they're dark sky compliant fixtures, and they provide a very even distribution. So the proposed fixtures are on a 12-foot pole. We feel it's going to be an improvement over the lighting that is currently out at the office parking lot today, which is on a 20-foot pole. It's a high intensity fixture, does not have cutoff optics to it, and they're not LED fixtures. The fixtures that we're proposing along Thanet as well are these lower 12-foot pedestrian scale fixtures to provide safe pedestrian light levels along that sidewalk. This is the sidewalk where we added the couple of benches that were discussed last 2 weeks ago. The lighting along this sidewalk, we feel, be a benefit for any member of the public who's walking along there. Certainly the Avalon Bay residents, as well as Pearl, the senior residents who will be residing there as well. The lighting design does not, we strive to not overlight the site, provide just code compliant, safe lighting from dusk to dawn timeframe. So that gives concludes the 2 items that were remaining or outstanding at the end of the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. That is all I have in terms of direct from Mr. Carmen, reserving possibility for redirect rebuttal, but I don't know if there are any additional questions of Mr. Carmen.
The board members have questions for Mr. Carmen? It was very helpful for us to see the responses, the response memos that came, which Carrie kindly forwarded to us. And I can't recall whether this was part of Mr. Carmen's memo or someone else's, but Mr. Carmen, would you be the right person to speak to the complete streets? How the complete streets approach exactly will be carried out, or is that someone else's work?
I can describe the strategies that we worked as a team, the design team, to incorporate the complete streets. And that
let me narrow down what I'm particularly interested in, because I'm and I don't want to limit you, but what caught my attention is we've talked at this at the last meeting about eliminating the parallel parking along Thanet, but parallel parking was represented in one of the memos as being part of a complete streets, traffic calming kind of approach. And so what I'm really wanting to understand is, in the absence of parallel parking, would there be things like, instead of sharrows, like colored, green colored bike lanes or something like that, that would visually both meet the complete streets objectives, but also help with traffic calming? That's the kind of thing I'm trying to get at here, because I think we do want to omit that parallel parking because it's safer for bikes. So that's what I was hoping you would address.
Sure. So, Peter, would you like me to speak?
Yeah,
about
if you could just briefly discuss the other measures.
So we in terms of the pedestrian circulation, the sidewalks are part of the design. We did have those parallel parking spaces, and then adjacent to that, we had the sharrows for the bikeway. In reviewing some of the comment letters, there was discussions of creating Thanet as a bike boulevard, which really identifies it as more of a shared cartway, bikeway with some signage. And we're happy to do that, certainly incorporate that signage and identify it as a bike boulevard. And I don't think that it's necessarily, it needs to be done with or without the parallel parking. I think it can function fine with or without. We understand the concerns related to doors opening and that potential conflict with bicycles.
Okay.
Could I ask you a quick question? So what exactly is a bike boulevard besides the fact of signage indicating that it's cartway that's shared by bikes and cars?
That's really it, Mr. Muller. It is not it is not identified as a specific bike lane. It's more of a shared use. When the traffic volumes are lower, it can be done as a bike boulevard.
Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this, just because we're really starting to attempt an educational campaign throughout town to talk about bike boulevards, because we recently put in some over the summer. So I hope the board will indulge me. Basically the concept of a bike boulevard is it's one step above sharrows. Sharrows essentially say bicyclists and automobile drivers are equally entitled to the roadway. And a bike boulevard suggests that bicycles are supposed to have primacy on that roadway. Cars are permitted, but they're really supposed to defer to the bicycles. So that's the concept, and it's achieved in a variety of ways. One is signage, one is reduced speed limits. So in some cases, you might go to a 20-mile-per-hour instead of a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit that you might expect on a residential road like this. There can even be other kinds of traffic calming, whether it's, speed pillows that could create sort of a speed bump for cars, but where the bicycles can pass between, so they don't have to go over the bump, or things like that. So there are a lot of ways to accomplish it, but theoretically or philosophically, it's giving bicycles sort of a greater right to the roadway.
Madam Chair,
Helpful.
I wanted to ask David a follow-up question. David, is it usually a road like this, which is basically a cul-de-sac, is that usually appropriate for bike boulevard designation as opposed to like a busier street or a street that connects to other streets that's part of a network or a grid?
Well, so I want to make a distinction between busier streets and streets that are part of the network, because certainly our other bike boulevards in town are parts of a network that are intended very much to give connectivity to bicyclists to be able to reach destinations around town. But they're very specifically supposed to be low traffic roads, both because we don't want to inconvenience a lot of drivers by making a busy traffic road a bike boulevard, but also because bicyclists will feel safer on a lightly traveled roadway. So, to get to your direct question, whether a cul-de-sac is an appropriate bike boulevard, maybe not, but on the other hand, we're hoping that we may be able to make some other connections with either bike lanes or, a second driveway out from this property. We're still working on that. But if we're able to make those connections, then this might be an appropriate bike boulevard. For instance, for people from this neighborhood who might be going to the charter school. If we can make this additional connection I was talking about, this might be a preferable way for kids who are going to the charter school to get there instead of going to Harrison and having to deal with the Harrison traffic.
Ms. Sachs, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Was the suggestion for the bike boulevard on Thanet from the town, or that was something that Avalon volunteered? How did that come into the conversation?
That
think it
was
was from
that was my
staff.
suggestion in my memo.
Oh,
It was in conjunction with the fact that we have Gordon as a bike boulevard, that there are proposed improvements to traffic calming on Terhune, and it's serving 301 units of housing. That it's not a typical cul-de-sac, so to speak. It's serving a large community. So it was my suggestion that they consider designing it as a bike boulevard, not segregating bike traffic from the other traffic and signing being appropriate for this particular street.
Because I just have to say that, you know, one of the issues we have now is that we have a tremendous amount of traffic that has to get in and out of the this what is now a land, essentially an enclosed, it's a cul-de-sac. And you know, and I think it would not be ideal to have traffic backed up into that cul-de-sac. I mean, one of the issues that we're facing in this whole area is multiple developments going in and trying to manage the traffic. There is, and as someone who lives on the other side of this development and has a child at the charter school, I don't know that I would feel safe having that child bike through that development. I mean, just because it's a bike boulevard, I just because you call it a bike boulevard, I don't know how that's actually gonna, how that's actually gonna play out in terms of safety. I don't think that unless we are able, which we are now exploring, another means, as you know, Jim, because I know you looked at it yesterday, we are, you know, actively exploring a means of egress, another vehicular artery, in which case I think it would be great to have bikes coming through the whole property. But as it stands now, I would not feel comfortable encouraging children to share that road with the cars coming in and out, because there are 300, and I know the senior units may not have, you know, as many cars per person, but I think that's going to be heavily trafficked unless we're able to create that other artery. And I'm wondering, was it, and I must, you know, apologies if I missed this, but was there any discussion of a separate bike lane or some other way of bringing the bikes in and out so they're not in sharing that road, which is already quite narrow?
I think the problem is we can't widen the road because of the wetlands. And it's not quite wide enough to have bike lanes and car lanes.
That's correct.
That's the problem.
So basically the hope is by calling it a bike boulevard that what? That
Well, it's not just calling it a bike boulevard. It's designing the road, and the design is minimal design. It's additional signing. It's still the sharrows. It's making it clear to the traveling public that bicycles are preeminent on this street. And it's supposed to be meant as a traffic calming. I didn't put it in as a proposed condition. I made it as a suggestion to the developer that they consider this as a bike boulevard. It wasn't something that I was trying to impose as a condition of approval.
Okay, because I am very excited that across the street, we will be having, which we'll be discussing later tonight, a dedicated bike lane that will go from Thanet into the shopping center. So, you know, I think we definitely want to encourage the residents of Avalon to be biking through what will be a cut through to the shopping center. But I just am mindful of the fact that there's going to be a lot of traffic there in that cul-de-sac, and I'm concerned about, definitely would not want to make it a bike boulevard to encourage children to be driving through there to get to school.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that comment that Mia made, which is, if we get rid of the parallel parking, narrow the roadway a little bit, could we get a real shared use path on one side of the road that was more like 10 feet wide instead of a 5-foot sidewalk? Because that's actually what we're providing on the other side of the road, or that's the intention, is to have a shared use path that's 10 feet wide. I
That
don't know
would
if you've frozen,
be
time, you're just
preferable.
trying to think about the answer.
So, Mr. Cohen, I think that related to the roadway, that's getting outside of my expertise when we're talking about narrowing a roadway or something. So I would have to defer that comment to somebody, to either the civil engineer or the traffic engineer.
Okay.
I don't know enough about all of this to have a strong opinion, but what you just described, David, sounds really, really good as somebody that tries to use my bike as much as possible. I mean, I think anything that we can do to make this a very attractive place for people to live who really prefer not to drive. And, not just kids on bikes, but people of all ages, of course. That could be great. And I guess my follow-up question, because is this a treatment that the town would do, or are we talking about asking the applicant to do this?
I think the applicant is the one who's making the improvements to this roadway. So whatever we agree on with them, I would think it would be their responsibility.
Mhm.
Well, I
Actually,
think
I'm wondering
first
if
we're
Heather,
asking whether it's even possible, it
I
may
wonder if
be
Heather
like-
might have some insights.
Uh, Yeah, Mr. Laplace, you had your hand up, and then Heather, if you have anything to add after Michael.
Thank you.
says-
I just wanted to jump in about the removal of the on-street parking, because that was, I believe that the town, that we wanted that when we were reviewing the concept. And it seems to me that if you take it off the road, you don't have that as a traffic calming effect, and you just have cars. The cartway, if it's just automobiles, I guess it's not a bike boulevard anymore if you have off-road lanes. I don't know if the board as a group has really thought about whether they want the on-street parking or not, but I don't know if I missed that discussion.
If I can respond, that was talked about some last time.
Yes,
On-street spaces are above and beyond what the requirement is,
right.
parking requirement for the development. And I was actually the one who had suggested putting on-street parking
Right.
back when, but I was suggesting it as a way to reduce impervious coverage by meeting some of your parking requirement on the roadway. If these are extra parking spaces above and beyond the requirement, I don't see that benefit.
Right. I guess one value they would have is if we wanted to remove parking elsewhere on the site. It's just
Right.
something to keep in mind. Thank
Sure.
you.
I think we discussed this last time, and basically it was David's idea originally because he thought that it would be in place of that parking, but as it turned out, it's in addition to that parking, and there doesn't seem to be an ability to remove some of the other parking. So I guess the question is, I agree with David. I think the ideal would be to have a shared use path on one side and not have the bike boulevard, not have the parked cars, and have a viable way for people to get from Avalon directly through across the street, which will be a shared use path on the other side and into the shopping center. Because I think there will be a lot of kids also in that building who will be biking to school, to all of the schools that are in the area. John Witherspoon is around the corner and Little Brook is right down the other side. And there will be bike lanes there will be bike lanes on Terhune in the not too distant future. So it would be great for the kids in Avalon to be able to safely exit their own complex and not have to be sharing the road with the cars that want to get in and out, which I think is not ideal.
Heather, do you have anything to add? Any thoughts from your perspective about the shared path and narrowing the cartway, et cetera?
I think it's something to be looked at a little bit more. I definitely think with the shopping center on the other side of Terhune, I mean, that's a very big pedestrian generator. So I think there's going to be pedestrians and there's going to be bicycles. It's just where's the best place and the most safe place to put them, because there is the curve in the roadway on Thanet. So do you want them on the road, or as Mia is saying, do you want them on like a separate path? Because there is going to be a crossing, most likely the municipality, there's going to be a pedestrian crossing at Thanet to cross Terhune to get to the shopping center. So, you know, it's going to be used.
So my recommendation would be, it seems like we're not going to be able to figure out the logistics tonight. But I think, you know, I feel confident that we can work this out with the applicant, figure out what makes the most sense. We've had a very positive working relationship with the applicant thus far, and they've been very responsive. So I think it could be noted that we would like to work together, continue to work together with the applicant, the town, as the town develops the traffic calming that's going to go in at the head of the entrance, to figure out what would be the safest way to create a bike, a safe bike route there.
Yeah, I'm completely comfortable with that. And I think it's really important to have an integrated approach to all of this, given what's happening, nearby. I think another thing to keep in mind, which may be already rattling around in other people's heads, is that a fair number of the pedestrians here will be older people. And so that may make a shared wide sidewalk. I mean, it would just have to be, very carefully marked and everything. And as long as, the priority is safety and bike and ped over cars, even though it will generate a lot of cars. I think that's the direction the town has been wanting to go in, and it's consistent with the climate action plan and all of that.
If I could just,
Mr. Planner?
if I could just make a quick suggestion, Madam Chair. Once we conclude Mr. Carmen's testimony, we're going to have Mr. Skepinets discuss stormwater anyways. I think he could opine on this issue in terms of the width of the roadway and possibilities on Thanet, just to shed some light on the issue. Perhaps we won't have to defer this. Maybe we can reach a resolution.
That's a good segue then to Mr. Skepinets and stormwater. Unless excuse me, does any members of the board or staff have any other questions for Mr. Carmen? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My next witness, I'd like to call Mr. Skepinets.
Mr. Flannery, you suddenly got very, very quiet, which you probably didn't mean to happen. Or was that my audio? Was he very quiet?
No, it
His
was
audio
for
was
me.
a little low.
Yeah,
but
for me
I
too.
think he was just calling on Mr. Skepinets to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't hear Mr. Flannery, but if you can hear me, Brett Skepinets, Dynamic Engineering Consultants, site engineer for the project.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. So let me start with the point of the bike lanes. The current cartway, so the travel way for cars is 26 feet, okay, in the roadway. Now, when we design or have in the plan show the parallel parking in front of the townhomes, there isn't enough width to allow for that parallel parking and the sidewalk. In fact, in our plans, we show the sidewalk being shifted and creating an easement on the townhome property to enable to maintain the 6-foot wide walkway along with that parallel parking. That just tells us we have minimal width there. So yes, if we look to get rid of the parallel parking, that helps us to move that walkway, keeping that 6-foot path within the right of way, consistent with the 6-foot path that extends to the south and to the north of our proposed development that's already there. On the other side of the roadway, we have a similar situation. You've got the path that's in existence and, just a small sliver of area between the pathway and the travel way. So in my opinion, trying to squeeze in a separate bike lane is just not gonna work. Something's gonna have to give. I think it's either, it would end up resulting in loss of the walkways on either side, which I think is probably a worst case scenario. We don't want to lose those pathways to either side of the road for pedestrian safety.
I think what we were talking about was a shared use side path on the townhouse side.
Okay.
6 feet is not wide enough for that. The current standard is 8-foot minimum and 10-foot preferred, and I would think you need 10 feet with elderly pedestrians.
Right.
So that's the question, is could we get a 10-foot path if we got rid of the parallel parking?
Bear with me let me just take a quick measurement, 1 second.
But David, if we couldn't get the 10 feet, I'd say 8 feet would be better than nothing at all. I mean, if it's simply not possible to get the 10 feet.
Hopefully it is possible with the somewhat narrower cartway.
It's
I mean, lanes is what I mean. Sometimes the AASHTO standards for lanes are wider than they, anyway, Mr. Scapinitz, go ahead.
just in front of the townhomes there. I mean, we would be able to fit a 10-foot path within the right of way, but there would be no green space there. It would be from the edge of the right of way, to the curb line would essentially be filled with that path. So, to go for that section to go to 8 feet would leave a little bit of breathing room between the curb and the travel way or the pathway.
Yeah, like I said, I would rather keep it at 10, Mia, because of the kinds of pedestrians that we're talking about having in this area. I'm sensitive. There are a lot of people in town who are really concerned about bicycle automobile conflicts and therefore want to avoid having bikes in the car lanes. I'm equally concerned about bicycle pedestrian conflicts. There have been pedestrians killed, not in Princeton, but, by having a collision with a bicyclist. It's really important if you're gonna have both users on a shared path, it's really important to have it be adequately wide.
I agree with that. I don't know how others feel. Mr. Quinn, you're a very experienced biker. Do you have an opinion about this?
I share David's. I think David's come up with an elegant solution here and I think his articulation of the potential for a bad bicycle pedestrian interaction. We've seen anecdotal reports on Access Princeton about pedestrians who are unhappy with bikes sharing side paths. And I think that we really need to make it clear through signage that it's a shared side path. But I think that's a good solution. Anything that gives cyclists an opportunity to avoid being doored by parallel parked cars is a good thing. There are going to be riders who are comfortable in riding on the road and who will face that potential problem with being doored. But I support Mr. Cohen's solution here. The wider, the better.
And aren't there ways of marking these shared, not just with signage, but with actual markings on the cartway, the sidewalk / bike way itself, to delineate whose spaces?
I don't think that we're talking about a wide enough side path that could accommodate pedestrians and cyclists going in multiple directions. It would be great if we could, but it doesn't sound like it's wide enough. I think signage and also stuff that's painted onto the surface itself.
Yes, that's what I, yeah,
is-
that's what
yeah,
I mean.
and
painted
not
on the
not dividing it up, but just
No.
making it clear that this, so that pedestrians and cyclists can expect one another to be be in that space.
Right, exactly.
If I may, in hearing Mr. Quinn speaking, he mentioned the car doors. Now, this situation in providing the 10-foot paved path results in not having the parallel parking.
Oh,
So that situation would go away in order to provide that. So we're
Right.
saying providing the 10-foot wide asphalt path in front of the townhomes for that section at 10-foot wide, and that's it, correct?
Could I ask a question? I can't completely visualize how the design is it that the cartway is a 10-foot path on the cartway and it's delineated in the way that Louise was talking about?
Let me, if I can, I will share my screen. That way everyone can see the visual.
I think there's still a curb, Jerry, but I.
Oh, there would
can
be a
see
curb.
too.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so
Right.
everyone clear there?
Uh,
You want me to,
don't
We can't
your-
see, if you're
Okay, yeah.
sharing, we can't see it.
let me go through. You should be able to see it, is that correct?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on the area of question. And so what we're saying is in the section here, where there's the parallel parking, we would provide a 10-foot wide asphalt path in this location in lieu of having the parallel spaces there. And that walkway, so essentially that's it. There you would have now a curb, you would have a full height curb on the outer edge of where those spaces are, which would follow the current, match up with the edge of the curbing on either end of those spaces, maintaining a 26-foot wide cartway for travel of vehicles, but then you would have the 10-foot separate path or shared path in front of the townhomes.
And extending down to Thanet, correct?
To Terhune.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
I'm
right now
sorry.
there's a 6-foot wide asphalt path here. So we're saying extend that, add the additional width of asphalt along to end at Terhune.
Correct.
Okay.
With the appropriate surface marking.
Right. We still would have the signage placed in as previously testified.
Sounds like a great solution to me. Hopefully it connects on the same side as the connection in the ordinance for the for the ordinance referral we'll be discussing.
Mhm.
Yes, it's on the same side.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Scapin. You can stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
So is there going to be anything, I guess there's going to be markings on the road as well, like boulevard markings. Is that the plan?
No, this is instead of the bike boulevard markings. This is instead of the bike
So
boulevard.
there's not going to be anything on the road except for like the lines down the middle.
Right.
Well, there's
I
going to
mean-
be the curb. There's going to be the curb, right? That's what's going to separate the path from the.
Well, yeah, there'll be a curb, but
Correct.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
the
do we want
windows
to do we want to have markings on the road as well?
Denon, what I just said was that the whole reason how we ended up with the path was the concern about children sharing that road with the traffic. That's how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that there's people that might want to ride on the road also. Not everybody wants to ride on a sidewalk.
Well, then I guess they can ride on the road too.
that.
But I think we're trying to
Yeah,
encourage,
there's nothing that keeps them from being on the road.
we're trying to encourage people to ride on the path where it's safer.
And I think people who are comfortable enough riding on the road don't need a sign telling them that there's a bike path
Yeah, I
over
mean,
there. I mean, they'll make the choice.
I
In my
just feel-
experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, there's people that will feel comfortable riding on the road. I mean, one thing that I feel like might be helpful, I mean, I think that it can't hurt to have markers. I don't know if that would potentially encourage people to go on the road instead. But I mean, I think that having, so it's 26, so 13-foot lanes, it's pretty wide. And I feel like, you know, cars, when they have wide lanes, they drive more fast and more erratic. And so I feel like having some sort of markers or shoulder painted lines might be useful. I don't know. It's just me.
Mr. Laplace, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Zenon just said about, you know, two 13-foot lanes, 26 feet width of pavement, and then a 10-foot paved lane for bikes and pedestrians next to it. That's a lot of pavement. I mean, if we're going to have a 10-foot new path paralleling Thanet Road, should we narrow the cartway then? Because I am worried that 26-foot wide street that's just for automobiles is going to, how are you not going to speed on that road? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I just, yeah, I agree. I thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. I mean, I like, you know, that there's nice space for people on like a special path. I mean, although that is a lot more impervious surface. And I think that, you know, it's a highway, you know, a 13-foot lane is massive.
I'm sorry, Michael, aren't we losing some of that by widening the side, you know, essentially the walkway? Isn't it, aren't we getting rid of the parallel parking on that side in order to widen it and therefore reducing the cartway?
Yeah, I thought we were talking about narrowing the roadway. Is that not the case?
I just heard,
clear to me.
yeah, I heard 26-foot wide cartway. So is that going to be
It's
narrower?
it's being narrowed by the parallel parking in front of the homes.
Let me maybe
No, that's going to be the same. It's
Can
not going to be narrowed. It's going to be narrowed from the.
Let's let
Mr.
Mr.
Skapanitz
Skapanitz
can
describe.
clarify.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that the roadway width is 26 feet and we're matching the 26-foot width along that section in front of the townhomes. We get rid of the parallel spaces being removed. That just allows us to put in the pathway on the curb, you know, off the curb between the roadway and the townhomes. The roadway width stays the same, and recognize too that the 26-foot width is only 2 foot, it's 2 foot wider, essentially where my hands are apart right now, than what a minimal width of a roadway or a driveway, even a parking lot drive aisle would be at 24 feet. So it's not, while 13-foot aisle sounds like it's a large amount, it is essentially it's a typical amount you would see to give room for a driveway or a drive path for a vehicle. And so, and in this case, going to 24 feet doesn't change the ability to make that path, that 10-foot wide path, any different or oriented in any different way.
Just a question.
Is the road being narrowed? I mean, sorry, is the road that's there now, is that the road that is that the width that's going to remain?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, Zenon, have you walked down? I mean, it's not a super wide road. In fact, I know when the schools were interested in that property, there was some, it wasn't even wide enough to qualify for getting emergency vehicles in and out for a school setting. It's not a super wide road.
But I think the issue is that 13-foot wide lanes promote speeding. I mean, that's been proven. I mean, people now when they're developing residential neighborhoods are usually looking at an 11-foot wide lane, something like that. It's going to be a wide street, and now you're adding a 10-foot road basically next to it. So that's my concern is that's just a lot of pavement.
So maybe the solution is to put some more, you know, if there's extra room, then why not put the green, whatever, you know, the green shrubbery, you know, stuff that actually looked very attractive in the picture. Maybe that could go in between. It could still remain, but it would go in between the 10-foot path and the road.
Would you have to, Mr. Skapan, would you have to reduce the cartway in order to have a 2-foot green space, as me was suggesting, or maybe even more?
Yeah, in order to provide the plantings, we would need more to begin with. I can defer to Mr. Carmen, I know who's here from the landscaping side, but yeah, I don't know, to fit landscaping, pathway, cartway all in here is too much for this right away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't really see adding shrubs in the median like as a solution here.
No, not,
I mean,
not the median, just on the side, because you seem concerned that the road is too wide. I mean, what's your?
Or on the side or on the shoulder. I mean, I think that what I would see as solution is either adding markings to alert drivers of potential, bikers, which I think that there will be bikers on the road, or having a line as a shoulder to narrow visually the driving lane, and creating essentially like a area where, I mean, it's not going to be an official bike lane, but an area shoulder where a biker could essentially bike down. And I don't know, I mean, I think that a 10-foot wide path, I mean, it might be too much, to my opinion. I think like 8 feet. And I know that, like, it's not that much of a difference, but I think that, that's it.
The
10 feet
problem is these
is a
things,
whole
they're
nother.
engineering standards for this stuff. It's supposed to be 10 feet.
All right.
So I think that I would be fine reducing the cartway to 24 feet or even 22 feet, as Michael was suggesting, getting some green, not shrubbery, but grass between the shared side path and the road. But
So I don't know if we lost David. Heather wants to say something.
We need, I mean, I am concerned about the situation with the emergency vehicles. I mean, and that's why I'm not.
We really should be.
David, we're having a hard time. You're sort of going in and out a little bit. We didn't get most of what you just said.
Yeah, I was saying that I think that the board should not be inventing roadway engineering standards on the fly. I think there are standards for all of this stuff. We should take the recommendations of our staff for what the best solution would be here. All
right, well, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that a bike boulevard is okay. I think that a shared side path is okay. I think that a hybrid or a bastardization of those two is not okay. I don't want to have a shared side path and a rideable shoulder on the road. I mean, that's just, it's crazy. We should make it clear to the roadway users what the expectations are for using the road by having a clear allocation of space to cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists.
Yeah, I agree with that, David. I want to say two things. One, just going back to my original point that maybe and agreeing with David, maybe this is not like, deciding this on the fly doesn't make sense. I mean, I think we could, have a recommendation that there be a shared use side path and, an attempt to, an attempt to continue the traffic calming pattern down that road. But I'm just not sure that we can figure out exactly what makes sense tonight. And I also am concerned. I know there are issues with emergency vehicles getting in and out, and particularly now that if we don't have the extra road, there are real, in addition to the fire safety issues that I know we'll be hearing from others about tonight, there are concerns about getting emergency vehicles in and out. And I know that's a concern, that this was already a concern about the road. So I think we should just have a recommendation that we would like to have a side path. And we also, would like to, work with the applicant to create maximum traffic safety on that road and emergency vehicle safety, and then let our professionals, work that out with the applicant. That's my recommendation.
Does that include eliminating the parallel parking on Thanet?
Yes.
And we'd be glad to work with your professional staff to finalize that.
Right, as a condition of approval.
Michael.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that too. Michael?
Yeah, I just want to factor into an urban design concern. Not only am I concerned about all this pavement, but also we need to accommodate shade trees along the street. And I'm not sure where we put in shade trees, you know, and accommodate a 10-foot wide path. So we're gonna have to look at that.
Yep, that's a really good point. And I think go back to how important I think it is for what happens on this street to be very, very much integrated and of a piece with what's happening nearby, so that people who are going from, you know, this tract into that one, or, you know, this neighborhood into that one, don't have different rules, different signals and stuff, and can have some sense of comfort of what's coming and what to expect everywhere. So,
Okay.
so
Yeah, I'm fine with that. You know, I guess you know, if that's what people want, that's fine. But I also would like to you know, keep in mind the increase in pervious surfaces, and so I don't know
Yep.
how much that is going to create, but you know, it's a long path. So
right, well, and that's exactly the point Mr. Laplace was raising, and I think his point about, you know, not completely losing the shade trees is well taken also. So, so nothing is completely resolved,
clarify?
except that we are removing the parallel parking. And I think we're agreed on the path forward, so to speak, for coming to a design that is ped and bike friendly and safe and integrated with the road treatments and approaches nearby. Does that sound right?
That sounds great, Louise.
Did I hear that there were possibly, I think we were discussing maybe two choices, like an A and B from what I was hearing of a discussion. Maybe we narrow it down to two potential design choices, and then we could decide later instead of having it so open-ended.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we were saying that it should be either bike boulevards or it should be a shared side path.
Right.
Those were the two choices that were being considered.
It seems to me there's much more interest, obviously, in the shared path. And David, I think you've made a compelling argument about the 10 feet. And I think the only issue, as I see it, is do you keep the 26-foot wide cartway, or do you reduce the cartway and have maybe enough room that you can put, you know, some green in? And that's a question of a study of emergency vehicle access more than anything else, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Mr. Scapenis is
Mr.
also going to discuss stormwater.
Yes.
Yes.
So following our meeting, we obviously heard the testimony of Mr. Scupion. I see he was on. We followed with Mr. Scupion, Mr. Purcell, to discuss stormwater comments that were issued in more detail, going back and forth, and they were able to answer some questions. We got some more guidance with respect to the comments that were issued. We are obviously working on this, and it was mentioned earlier in the previous testimony that, you know, the other part of this project is Pearl, and so our design has worked in conjunction with them. So their engineer was also part of the discussions, and basically we feel satisfied with that we can accommodate all the comments in our revised plans, whether it be through the revised calculations and the details that need to go with it, as outlined in a letter that we actually issued yesterday of November 4th, addressing all of Mr. Scupion's comments from his letter. But obviously, we would look to, as a condition, to look to address those comments, submitting that information for the review of Mr. Scupion and Mr. Purcell for approval. One thing just to end with, though, is that we are confident that with the changes being made, while they would be happening to the basins, whether it be the above ground or below ground, we do not see any changes to the layout occurring as a result of the modifications that need to be made.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if there are
Chairman,
any
if I
further
might
questions.
add on something to that, I would like to comment that they've been very cooperative working with Mr. Scupion and me and are continuing to do the best that they can to minimize the flows coming out of this this project. And the current status, and we're hoping to enhance it, is that the flows leaving the basin into the tributary that everybody is concerned with are going to be less than, not quite significantly less than, but at least less than the flows that would have come off this site prior to the office park having been built. So their pre-developed condition is looking at this as virgin land, not as if there's an existing office park. And they're meeting the flows and reducing the flows to less than what would have been prior to any development. So I think that's important for everybody to understand.
That is
We're not
important.
adding anything, we're actually reducing the flows into that tributary.
Thank you.
Right.
Could you repeat that one more time, Jim? Because I know we've heard there have been a lot of concerns about stormwater, and just in case anyone missed that, could you just repeat it one more time?
Sure. The flows coming off of this development are slightly less. I can't say they're greatly less, but they're slightly less than the flows that would have come off of this drainage area prior to any development having been done, as if this was wooded land. So their pre-development condition is if there wasn't a parking lot or a building there. So that was the comparison they were making, and they're meeting or exceeding those requirements.
And,
So-
and I'll just comment that, you know, the Environmental Commission has been working for years to get past a redevelopment stormwater ordinance that would require exactly what Mr. Purcell was just talking about, that if a site were being redeveloped, that you would have to look at it, any of the area that was being redeveloped as though it had not been developed for your stormwater. So essentially what Mr. Purcell is saying is that this applicant is meeting a standard that we've been trying to get adopted in town for years, and still hoping to get adopted. But I'm really pleased to hear that it's at that level.
Me too.
So just to be clear though, in terms of, you know, that management, I mean, is that, I mean, I'm assuming that's like under certain storm conditions, because, you know, I think after a certain amount of water fills up a detention basin, you know, essentially, you know, it will, you know, end up overflowing. And so maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but I mean, is that, how does the storms factor into that equation?
You want to talk about the 2, 10, and 100-year storm, Jim?
Those are the parameters that they use, right? So when we design stormwater management, we're looking at the 2, 10, and 100-year storms, and we have to meet certain requirements in order to minimize the amount of flow. And their flows for each of those storms is equal to or less than what it was prior to any development. So
Okay, so even
what's
all,
leaving the bottom basin is less than what would have entered the tributary before any development. And Joe may be able to.
Yeah,
to
Jim,
clarify
if I can add to that, 2 points. One is when we reviewed the project, we looked at two pre-developed conditions. We looked at a totally wooded site. We also looked at the site in its present condition, but with those existing basins, because they're reducing the flows that were coming from the developed site. And they were designed under the earlier version of the Princeton ordinance. And we made sure that the allowable outflows for the new project was the lesser of those two conditions. Either totally wooded with no detention basins, or developed like it is now, but with the basins. So we've picked the lowest of those two different conditions. The other thing is, yeah, we use we use a hypothetical design storm. It's universally accepted as the way it could possibly rain. It's based on statistical rainfall data. But we've also done something else here. And some of the folks on the board may recall a storm that happened in Princeton back on July 30th of 2016. The university had some really good rainfall data, and it was a fairly intense, short duration storm. And from working on other projects with the engineering department, I have that rainfall data. So we've also been checking it, not just with the hypothetical storms that the ordinance requires, but also this real significant rain event that actually happened, just to make sure. It's like the Coke commercial. There's nothing, nothing like the real thing. And we want to make sure that it's not just meeting hypothetical requirements. How is it doing on a real severe storm that actually happened in Princeton? So I think we're covering as many bases as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Scoopy, and that's
Great, thanks.
Any more questions of Mr. Scapinetz on the stormwater issue?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right.
So actually, I mean,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but I mean, I guess that's great that it's managing all the stormwater. But I guess how will we proceed with this modification to the site design with an expanded 10-foot pathway? And how will those calculations be affected by that? I mean, I can't imagine it'd be that much more, but are we going to?
We will include. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
We will include that added impervious into
Yeah.
the equation that we submit in for final review. So
Okay.
that will.
Right.
Great.
All right. Thank you. My next witness is Mr. Bradford, who will be discussing the proposed colors and materials exhibit. Mr. Bradford was previously sworn and qualified.
Are we interested in having Mr. Persoro, who's interested in stormwater, speak, or are we going to open up public comment at the end?
I think if there is now, Jerry, please correct me, if he wants to pose a specific question.
Well,
Testimony, is it appropriate to do that now, or is it or to wait?
I think it's appropriate to do that now. And in fact, if you want, you can certainly hear any public comment as opposed to questions on stormwater management. But if it's comment, for the reasons I gave in that email that I sent out yesterday, the speaker has to be sworn in. I believe Mr. Pizarro was sworn in at the last meeting.
Oh,
So
I'm
just,
sorry.
just to clarify, are we doing questions with Mr. Scapinetz?
Well, that's the question. Should we do, oh, yeah, whether we want to do just questions or questions and comments. But it's your choice.
Just questions this whole time, Mr. Mueller. So maybe.
I'm sorry, say again?
We've been doing questions only this whole
Yes,
time.
I was going to
Okay.
suggest if there is a specific questions they
Okay.
could be posed now and then testimony later or
That's
comment.
And that's
I think
fine.
we
yeah.
discussed having all public comment at the end of all our testimony.
Yep.
Very,
At the
very
last
good.
hearing, I think that's what we had agreed to.
He lowered his hand. It's good.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Proceed with
Okay.
Mr. Bradford, or are we opening it up? Mr. Scapinetz opened up to the public just for.
Are there
questions
other
and
members of the public who have questions for Mr. Scapinetz? If so, I'll open up the meeting for public questions right now. Are you seeing anything, Mr. Cohen? Any hands raised for specific questions for Mr. Scapinetz regarding stormwater? You're muted, David. David, you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Yes, Mike Pizarro does have his hand up again, so I'm going to bring him in.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Again, my name is Mike Pissar. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed Institute. And I just have a couple quick questions on the stormwater, whether it's Mr. Skapanik's or one of the township's professionals. When you're talking about reducing the pre-development flow, are we talking volume or the rate of reduction?
It will be rate.
Right, okay. So overall, the volume may increase. We're not decreasing the actual volume that's coming off that site to a
That is correct.
development requirement. Okay, thank you. And the changes that, in order to meet that pre-development reductions, did you have to change the design of the system at all at this point?
We will be. We're in the midst of working on that with Mr. Scupian and Mr. Purcell. So there will be changes to what's in the plans currently, but there will be to things like the outlet structure, maybe some adjustments to the size of the basins, things of that nature. But that primarily will be it.
Okay. And so just so I understand, the way the system is currently designed and has been submitted to the township, and that the planning board has those documents and the public has those documents, that does not meet what is currently going to be planned or what you will be doing in the future.
Well, for the most part, yes, it does. What we need to do is we need to refine what we've provided to make adjustments for was essentially newer background information, and Mr. Scupian has provided us based on his knowledge of the stream and how it operates. We need to take that information and plug it into our calculations and make our adjustments accordingly. But I do not, like I said, I do not expect any changes to the layout. And we still intend to use the basins as they're shown in our plan in the same manner in the way that they're depicted in our set currently.
And did you submit any revised documents or additional documents to the township's professionals for tonight's meeting?
No, the only thing we did submit was a response letter yesterday, which addressed each one of the comments in Mr. Scupian's memo related to stormwater.
And is there anything in that letter that you haven't discussed tonight at this point?
No, we've discussed each one of those items with Mr. Scupian and Mr. Purcell. We went through them in detail. We understand what we need to do. We're on, I think, common ground in order to achieve our adjustments for the resubmission.
Okay, I apologize. My question wasn't clear. But from your testimony tonight, did you go through all of the points in your letter? Did you testify to those and discuss them before the planning board tonight?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right. That was all the questions I have. I appreciate it. I do have some comments at the end when that is appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have a particular concern, Mr. Pissarro, about something Mr. Skapanitz did not address tonight in his testimony? Or I just want to make sure we're sort of transparent here about.
So I guess two things. And I mean, this is, I guess, more in the way of comment, but somewhat procedure. The municipal land use law requires the applicant to provide at least 10 days ahead of time all the documents and information that they're going to rely on. The letter that was submitted yesterday, I don't believe was available to the public. I didn't see it when this meeting started. So there was, there's no way for me to review it and, respond to that. So that's one comment. And I know, typically things are submitted on the fly right before meetings, and it's not necessarily available, but I do believe from a transparency perspective and a strict reading of the municipal land use law, that those documents should be available. My second point, and again, I know this is going against the grain of practice, but DEP and the stormwater rules and the MS4 permit requires that the stormwater review be complete prior to the planning board making its decision and issuing a resolution. DEP did an audit of the Princeton MS4 permit, and that was one of their comments to Princeton, that these things had to be done ahead of time. That was in a letter dated January 18th, 2019 to Princeton, that these things have to be done and reviewed prior to the planning board making its decisions. So the fact that there's going to be revisions and changes, and why I appreciate the applicants incorporation of green infrastructure and trying to meet these pre-development standards. I think in order for the planning board to pass on this application, all these things have to be done ahead of time and complied with.
That's a strange
Thank you
process.
for that. And I recognize I sort of drew testimony out of you, so I apologize for
Nope.
having sort of bait and switch there with questions versus testimony. But Mr. Mueller,
Yeah.
what were you?
If I could
about
just
to say?
briefly,
I was just going to say, I mean, that's a strange practice where a key component of an application is decided upon before there's even a hearing on the application. It's just a,
Mr. Muller, I'm not saying it has to be dealt before the hearing, but those issues have to be resolved to the planning board's satisfaction prior to them passing and approving the development.
that's not correct.
I am literally looking at the DEP's letter to the municipality. It's an audit of their MS4 permit. So
the
which,
planning
you know,
board
I
approval-
actually got from Princeton. So,
Planning board approval can be conditioned on, the other governmental approvals being obtained at a later date.
I understand that's the practice, but I do not believe that's actually what the rules say. And, I will read a section of that.
In the statute. In terms of
Well,
the, in terms of the report, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I interrupted you.
Well, I
wanted to
just
say-
wanted to,
Go ahead.
I mean, it's my fault because I'm the one that opened the door to this, but we're suddenly gotten well beyond the asking, posing questions to Mr. Skapanitz. So maybe, the horse is out of the barn and we just need to continue down this road, but.
If I could make a suggestion, just Mr. Skapanitz, if
Yep.
you just provide a little more detail in terms of the response letter, which of course was a response to professional report. It wasn't, a new report being submitted less than 10 days. So we're fine on that point, but just briefly go through some of the findings or some of the discussions that you'd had.
Well,
with,
I'll-
Mr. Scupion.
Can
Yeah,
before you even do that, can I just ask, so, Mike, are you saying that it basically, you're saying that the planning board has regularly not been in compliance with the law?
It's been a regular practice in most, if not all, planning boards throughout the state to sort of say any stormwater issues that are left unresolved can be dealt with as a condition of the resolution.
So
I don't
you're
believe,
proposing that we do it differently tonight?
my understanding is that is what DEP has said. It's been my understanding that's what the MS4 permit and the stormwater rules have required.
But
But
the
that has not been
MLUL
the
is
practice.
clear that governmental agency approval can be a condition of site plan approval. It's the
Well, and I
MLUL.
would take issue a little bit with unresolved, although I certainly understand your point about the final, final plans. But the point here is to make the stormwater management system better, superior. And there's been, people working on behalf of the town who are raising the bar, and the applicant is agreeing to do that. And so I feel a little bit conflicted about I guess I'm just expressing my own, personal ambivalence about the point that you're making in this particular case.
Maybe we
I
could
understand,
say-
and I sort of hesitated to bring it up because the applicant has, worked with the municipality, is apparently from a stormwater perspective, trying to meet the pre-development standards.
Right.
But I've just been seeing this issue more and more of significantly unresolved issues being left later on. And was reviewing the audit from DEP of the Princeton program, as I mentioned, dated in 2019. And when things are still left unresolved, I think, again, the practice should be to have them resolved before the board passes on the resolution.
So Mike, are you saying that in general, just so I can understand, it's a general, there's a general practice across the state, and that general practice has also been the case in Princeton? But
Yes.
But you're proposing that we do it differently tonight? Are you proposing that we do it differently tonight, or did you just want to make a statement in general about, did you just sort of choose tonight because you want to make a statement about how you feel in municipalities across the state are not doing something that you?
I have made this statement multiple times in multiple municipalities over the last several years. And, you know, again, as there are issues to be resolved.
And is this the first time that this has been brought to, I mean, I'm concerned to find that apparently you feel that the planning board in Princeton has not been compliant for some years now. I'm just wondering why you're just bringing it to our attention now.
Again, Ms. Sachs, I've made this, and I'm pretty sure I've made this in prior Princeton land use meetings. And I know I've done it in Hopewell. I know I've done it in Lawrence. I know I've done it in other towns, Cranberry. But, you know,
so
literally.
Can our staff speak to why, can any of our staff speak to if Mr. Pizarro has brought this up repeatedly to us before, why we're still, can anyone shed some light on this?
I think it's
I guess I would.
Maybe this is something that's more appropriate for the end of the hearing with the public statements, and we can just proceed with the remaining testimony of Mr. Scapenetz, and then we can move on to Mr. Bradford.
Yep. And at the end of, maybe we can hear the perspective from Mr. Purcell and or Mr. Scupian, you know, later on. Points taken, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
There any other folks who have specific questions for the applicant's engineer? David? Mr. Mueller, did you want to?
Yeah, I actually.
Tracy
Go ahead, David.
has her hand up, but it's for general comment.
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, Mr. Pizarro makes a number of points, and certainly the point he makes about the late filing of this last report. It was a letter, but it was dated yesterday. It doesn't have to be 10 days before. That's for the initial application. But certainly there's a rule that everything should be in at least 2 days before, and it should be posted on the website. And I don't know whether this was posted on the website or not. Basically, that
No,
report.
sir, I received it yesterday and I was not in the office yesterday, so I did not get it till this morning.
Yeah. But what it is, what the letter is a response to the report by Mr. Scupian, I guess, on October 18, and basically says, we're going to agree to this, and they actually agree to most things. And that's a basis for a set of conditions. But I think Mr. Pizarro's point was well taken. You know, certainly one of the elemental rules with respect to decisions by the boards and then resolutions is they have to be based upon something in the record. And what Mr. Pizarro was saying was, you know, there's no testimony about any of these points. And it would be worthwhile, although it would take some time, I'm afraid, for Mr. Actually, I don't know, but Scapenetz, it was signed by Daniel Sinal, who testified at the last hearing, just to go through the points and testify as to them. So at least we have a basis in the record. So if we impose these as conditions, we can go back and we can say, you know, not only that there was a letter, which is insufficient, but there was live testimony by a witness who was subject to cross-examination on this.
Agreed, Mr. Mueller. I think Mr. Scapenetz will go through the letter in detail at this point.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you. So never mind, Mr. Purcell and Mr. Scupian, you do not need to be worried about saying anything later on. Thanks, Mr. Mueller. Go ahead, Mr. Scapenetz.
Sure, and so I provided a response to Mr. Scupian's October 18th memo, which in general I touched on my last meeting that we had run through with his office, but I gave a point-by-point response. So starting with letter A, section A, of his memo. Item number 1, we acknowledged and that we would be providing a sequential response to each of his comments in the memo, which we did. Number 2 is regarding the TSS removal. So the removal of suspended solids is part of the stormwater management design. And that was one of the key components of my discussion over the last couple of weeks to run through that and have an understanding as to what we need to do in our updated stormwater management design to take care of that comment. So that's where comment number 2 addresses that we had that discussion and where we're going to end up. Item number 3, it talks about that we need to provide a consistency between the design and our design when it came to time of concentration in the calculations, and we said we would do so and meet it at 6 minutes. The next comment was an acknowledgement of Mr. Scupian's information related to Harry's Brook and updating or Harry's Brook branch, his model, and that we need to provide some additional modeling with regards to tailwater. And that was the information I've noted already in my testimony that Mr. Scupian has provided to us. I believe it was given to Mr. Cruz, Pearl's engineer, this week, and he's working on the background data that will then be ended up being used in our calculations. Number 5 is an acknowledgement of the calculation of our peak outflows as a result of either undeveloped or existing conditions. This is something that was just discussed earlier in our meeting, and the fact that Mr. Scupian confirmed that we're actually taking the better of the conditions, the undeveloped condition, and we're slightly reducing our runoff as a result of that versus the developed condition. Item number 6 talks to the fact that we need to provide a written waiver request related to groundwater recharge. And this is due to the soils testing that we've provided and I testified to at the last meeting. It is something that we need to provide as a result. And look, our design, our changes to the stormwater management design, we'll take a look at recharge as well. But I expect that we will provide that written request. And that is what for the waiver for groundwater recharge, which we are submitting. That's number 6.
Now, let me just interrupt this for a second on that. Now, it would be very unusual for a waiver to be granted, I guess, by the staff during resolution compliance. That would be something that the board would do during the hearing. Is there any problem with the board addressing this during the hearing, as far as you can tell?
Can you say that once again, Mr. Muller? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I mean, the way you set it up in your response letter, the waiver was going to be submitted as part of resolution compliance. I mean, that would be extremely unusual, really never done. And a waiver would have to be granted, only the board has the jurisdiction to grant a waiver, also called an exception. And do you see any issues with actually having the board address this basically during a board deliberation in terms of a waiver request?
I don't. I mean, and the reality is Mr. Scoopy and Mr. Purcell are on right now. They understand what we submitted. They have information to understand what we are looking to achieve here. So
Brett, let me clarify. That's not a waiver from a municipal ordinance.
Right.
Okay,
That's a waiver from an NJDEP requirement.
I see.
Exactly
So-
right. Yeah.
I see. So who would grant that? Would that be granted by DEP?
It has to be done by DEP, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Number 7 was comment information. Let me just read through the comment here. Yes, computation with regards to the rain gardens and we spoke with Mr. Scupian and agreed upon a method to address the performance and supporting calculations for those rain gardens. So that will be submitted. The operation and maintenance manual is number 8. We will provide that and it will be submitted once we have the final details of the stormwater management design issued and approved. Then we go to section B of the memo, which would be Princeton Thanet Road Urban Renewal Project Review Comments. My item number 1, the basin design. So we are we have a conflict noted between with our bay filter, the manufactured treatment device. And we obtained some new data that will be included in our report to get rid of the discrepancy that was found by Mr. Scupian. Number 2, we will provide updated stage storage calculations as well to Mr. Scupian. We're identifying that. Number 3, we acknowledged that the model for the 16 unit portion project, the townhome portion of the project, will be revised to again provide depict the sequence of runoff and routings calculations. The item number 4, the stormwater management report will include some additional mapping to show the time of concentration paths. That's a detail that Mr. Scupian is looking for in the report. We'll provide updated pipe sizing calculations in number 5. Number 6, we will identify some additional detail with regards to the manufactured treatment device and calculations regarding SANE that we obtained from the manufacturer. Item number 7 is regarding additional information regarding the rain gardens, which we'll provide. And number 8 are calculations for we need to provide just some additional identifying information to the storm sewer sizing computations, just to identify the correct manholes inlets within that data. So that is it. That's the summary of that letter. So for the most part, it's acknowledging that we will provide the information that Mr. Scupian is requesting in his letter.
All right, thank you. And Louise, could I make another suggestion?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I think it's probably worth just a minute's worth of input from Jim and Joe on whether it's really realistic to have these issues resolved beforehand. Because what my experience has been in Princeton, in other towns as well, and this is a general experience, as Michael indicated, is that these things are constantly changing. The design is changing with a change in design. The stormwater management program is changed. And when you bring it in, it's very complicated, as you well know, and there could be lots of different components. So it would be typical, to have conditions at the end. And as Peter has said, the municipal land use law permits that. I think if you try to satisfy the ideal of having all the issues resolved before the planning board hearing, I don't know that you could do it in a lot of cases consistent with the time constraints that the municipal land use law imposes on deciding a development application. So I just throw that out, and if Jim and Joe want to add anything to that, they're welcome.
I'd be happy to. Their stormwater design and on almost all applications that I see, the stormwater design is a complete design. And I'm going to use a term that Joe doesn't like to hear. These are tweaks. These are adjustments being made to modeling. They're not changing any physical design component. They may be making slight modifications to the size of the underground basin, for example, in the Lot A townhome unit because of some changes. I mean, even this evening, you have just, by removing the parallel parking, changed the impervious surface calculations. But it's not changing the overall stormwater design, and it's not changing the overall outflows that are going into the stream system that is the discharge point. So I don't see these as significant, and I see these as an ongoing consultation with the applicant to make sure that everything is done as best as it can be done. These are not changes, and I think that the review was complete prior to the planning board, and you're just hearing the modifications that need to be made based on that review.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
I'd like to pose one other question.
On this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Jim for all his work on this. He has been out there on the site in the rain, looking at the flow, meeting with the applicants. I mean, he spent a huge amount of time on this and we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for that.
Welcome. It is my
And
job.
Jim, to sort of boil all of this down to what I think, people nearby are particularly concerned about, and that is the impact on Harry's Brook. Can you, or maybe it's more appropriate for Mr. Skapinitz, I want somebody to, and I think we briefly addressed this last time too, but repeat, will this project increase flooding downstream, and just in layperson's terms, address that question? I understand the rate of discharge is going down. That means it should have, maybe a minuscule, maybe even a not noticeable reduction in the floodwater flow, but in any event, won't increase it. I mean,
Madam Chair.
yes.
Thanks for taking the words out of my mouth. You're exactly right. There's no, in the end, the answer is no, there will be no impact. But you answered it. We're taking this design and we're reducing the rate of flow to be less than what is there today, which is a positive impact.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Mr. Cohen.
And I just want to chime in that council and the Flood and Stormwater Committee are really focused on this watershed. And while this project will not increase the problems, we know that there are significant problems and we're looking for other solutions actively. So I just want to convey that we're not being dismissive of the concerns of the downstream neighbors. This is one of our top priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to open it up to the public one more time, just based on the most recent testimony of Mr. Skapinitz? And then we'll move on to Mr. Bradford.
Sure. Are there any, I don't think there, well, I don't know. Actually, I don't see that part of the picture. So David, I will open it back up. Any member of the public who has questions for Mr. Skapinitz based on the recent testimony and exchanges? Now is a good time to ask those. David is shaking his head, so there are none.
Thank you.
Okay, so that closing it again, and we'll proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My next witness, of course, is Mr. Bradford, who was previously sworn and qualified. Mr. Bradford, you have a submission you're going to be presenting tonight, some proposed colors and materials. I believe you have an exhibit if you want to share that with the screen.
I will. Can everybody see this?
Not yet.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, let me try again here.
there we go.
There we go. I think we're in business now.
Okay, great. Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. In response to questions we received at our last hearing on October 22nd, we have prepared 4 new exhibits to address questions primarily about exterior building materials and colors. So we have 1 exhibit for each building type. And for each of these exhibits, we filled in more specific information on the proposed materials and colors. We also propose a couple relatively minor revisions based on comments that we received during the hearing and prior hearing with the Site Plan Review Advisory Board. And we have sent physical samples to your board for review as well. So this first exhibit is numbered A18 and it's titled Mid-Rise Material Palette. And it shows the south and west walls of the portion of the mid-rise fronting on the pool courtyard. This is a view that we showed during our last hearing, we've just filled in, as I said, more information on the color and specific proposed selections for the materials. As I noted during the last hearing, we're proposing a neutral color palette for the elevator building with darker accents provided by this wood tone cement board panel and some variation in accent within the stone veneer that wraps the ground floor and comes up at the ends of the buildings. The SPRAB recommended during our October 19th hearing that we consider using our most durable selections, if you will, at the ground floor, balconies, and other places where people, experience these materials up close. So in this regard, we have proposed a revision, one adjustment to the exhibit of or design of this building that we showed you at the last hearing. And that is we're proposing to turn the cement board panel, this wood grain material, into the balcony niches. So whereas before we did turn the wood grain material into the balconies on the side of the bay, we are now proposing the back wall to be changed from vinyl siding to this cement board material. It was also suggested that we consider using our earth tone colors for our window sash. And you can see in the proposed selections on the top of the exhibit, we are now showing what the material or the manufacturer calls out as a sandstone color. Again, in the line of a more earth tone color and an adjustment from the white sash that we showed in the prior design.
Mr. Bradford, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you change could you change to presentation view so that we can see only the slide rather than your whole screen? Just to give us a bigger view. Right now it's.
Let me see. I'm sorry for that. I'm not seeing that selection
Okay,
here
it's
in this program that I'm using. I will zoom into the image.
okay. Thank you.
So moving on to exhibit.
Yeah, if I can interrupt for a second, we already had an exhibit A18, so that what you just showed us should be A19. Is there a way you can make it look?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the one that's now on the screen should be A20.
Okay.
I'm a little confused. We have some exhibits that were dropped off that are not the same numerical sequence. We have A1 through A4. Is that just for the record?
Yeah, we have 4 new exhibits, so we wanted to label them sequentially from where we left off at the prior hearing.
And that's what you forwarded to me? I have A1, A2, A3, and A4, which are very similar to what you're showing, but not
Okay.
identical.
Yeah,
So
I think
I'm
that's just
just
changing
confused.
only in the numbering. It's a change only in the numbering.
So that was for exhibit purposes only. Okay.
Right.
So this next exhibit will be A20, and it's titled Stack Flat Material Palette. And here we're showing the north wall of the Stack Flat building. It's building D in the application. This is the facade that faces the clubhouse and the mid-rise building. And here we propose a similar adjustment based on the feedback that we heard specifically in the SPRAB recommendations. And that is, again, at locations where folks are up close to materials that we propose, the most durable materials in those locations. So we are proposing, in this case, at the Stack Flat buildings, to turn the cement board of the bay window, again, into the balcony niche in a similar way that I described for the elevator building. So this cement board panel that is selection, we're calling from a Hardy panel sample of aged pewter, that gray panel would turn into the balconies. We're also proposing as we discussed last time, a wood tone accent for the bays, and this is in a slightly different color than in the mid-rise, with the same approach to get a interesting accent for the building and to add some variety. That is the adjustment that we're proposing for the stack flat buildings. I'll move on to the townhomes, which
The A21.
should be labeled A21. And as I noted during the 1022 hearing again, we are proposing for the townhomes a bit more color variation than we are for the other building types. And the goal there is to distinguish the individual townhome buildings themselves and to, give a strong sense of neighborhood character, which is a goal of the redevelopment plan. So here we're proposing 4 siding colors, 2 in a kind of darker range. One is titled Regatta, is this blue color, and then another darker gray tone in graphite, and then 2 lighter colors, one labeled Greystone and one in Driftwood. Try to zoom in a little bit more here on this image. So in this view, you can see the whole palette together. So this happens to be a view along Thanet in the area that we were discussing earlier concerning the parallel parking. You can see the 4 buildings all in one view here. So while the siding colors do provide some variation, we also wanted to include some elements that lend a kind of visual cohesiveness, also, called out in the redevelopment plan design standard. So we have proposed some elements that are consistent across all of the townhomes. So that includes this light cement board panel in the trim and in the bays between the windows. This, again, wood tone accent panel is a theme here. This is to provide some accent and variation. This wood tone is different than the colors I just showed you on the elevator building and stack flats, but again, consistent across the townhomes to lend this kind of little bit of visual interest. We are proposing, again, an earth tone color window, the sandstone again for the window sash, different than the white that we showed in earlier renderings, and a consistent roof shingle as well. You can see a snippet of it up in the right-hand corner. And then finally, the 4th exhibit and new exhibit should be A22.
22, right.
And it's titled Clubhouse Material Palette. And as I noted again during the last hearing, the clubhouse is really a critical focal point for this community, this new community. And the clubhouse is located at an important juncture, as we've shown in site plans. Right at the entry at the net circle, and then in the rear addressing the main outdoor amenity of the pool. We have proposed a kind of neutral color palette for the building, and this building is entirely in cement board, kind of neutral palette of panels on the wall. The selection from Hardy is called a cobblestone with a darker gray accent that ties into the darker aluminum windows. And then we kind of get these richer accents in the base, in the stone cladding at the base going into the retaining walls. And then kind of, as I noted during our last hearing, a really key feature of the building are these front and rear porches. So the wood timber framing of the porch itself is an important accent that plays off of this more neutral, lighter backdrop. So that does conclude my description of these new exhibits concerning the colors and materials. Be happy to take.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Any questions, Mr. Bradford?
Can you just continue sharing for just a moment so I can see whether folks are raising their hands for questions, or people can just speak up?
Yeah, I have not so much a comment, not so much a question, but a comment, which is that I only like one of the 3 wood grain colors, which is this one, which I think is also the same color as on the 4-story building. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I really felt that the other 2 colors were a lot weaker. I would be much happier if you used this one wood grain color throughout. I know it's a subjective reaction, but
What was, can we see the one that you didn't like, David?
sure. I didn't like this one. And I didn't like this one.
Yeah, that one jumped out at me.
Too fruity.
Yeah, like tangerine. But yeah.
Yeah, I think as I noted during the last hearing that these, and I think Mr. Cohen may have noticed this or made this comment as well, that the renderings are tough. That is why we sent the samples. And I think there's a pretty good size sample in the boards that we sent of these wood grain materials. And I agree, this does, with this brighter light, does, I hear your comment on this. In this rendering, I believe the physical sample is a much more attractive shade.
And we did have the opportunity to go and look at those. I don't know. I didn't avail myself of that. I don't know if you did, David.
I didn't get over there, I'm afraid.
So are there any other comments other than David's about the wood grain panel? Not seeing, I can only see 3 other people, so you'll have to just unmute yourself and speak up if you've got a question. Okay, so let's stop sharing the screen. Thank you very much for showing those. Is it the board's consensus that Mr. Cohen's comment be taken to heart and we ask the applicant to use just the one wood tone material? Anybody got any objection to that or anything?
I mean, strictly speaking, it's not something that we have jurisdiction over, so it's really
Right.
It's a request.
It's an ask, not a tell.
Yeah.
Just a discussion for consideration.
Okay. All right, is that it for your
That's all I have, Madam Chair,
Flannery?
in terms of professionals, correct.
Then let's see, any other final, before I open up for public comment, any other
Are there
board?
any public questions of Mr.
Comment?
Bradford?
Thanks for that prompt. Well, since he is your last, well, yeah, we'll start with that. Any questions from the public, specific for Mr. Bradford regarding the materials? Are you seeing anything, Mr. Cohen?
No new hands up.
Okay, then we'll open for public comment broadly.
Okay.
And
I'm going to bring
I know we
in
have,
Grace Sinden has been waiting patiently with her hand up since the very beginning of the meeting.
great, please bring her in.
Grace?
Ms. Sinden, I see a little block on my screen with your name on it. Are you on the phone or are you on a computer? Ms. Sinden, we cannot hear you. Can you hear me? David, can you tell what kind of device she is on? Is she on a phone versus
I know she was planning to attend by computer because I had some interaction with her this afternoon, trying to help her do that. I just pressed a button asking her to start her video. You can see she's already unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether there is a mute button on her own keyboard that might be.
She might have fallen asleep with her hand raised.
Oh, it's true that she might have left or something.
Well, I think she's, no, I think she's still sitting in front of her computer because she's
Okay,
in the meeting. I just
all right.
not sure she's awake.
Well, okay, are there others who have, I'm gonna look at the Q&A box here.
Oh, there she is. Grace just appeared.
Oh, Ms.
Grace,
Linden, we can see you now, but we cannot hear you.
Can you try to turn up your volume?
I just wrote to Mrs. Sinden and asked her if she could rejoin us with audio because we were unable to hear her.
I think she may be aware that we cannot hear her, but I just don't know.
She did forward me an email with her concerns.
Yes, she wanted to read her own statement into the record, I believe, and but she gave permission for someone, I believe, to read it on her behalf if she could not make the technology work. Feel bad about that.
Well, I don't see her, so perhaps, oh, there she is. Sorry.
Yeah, do we have her phone number by any chance? Might we try to help troubleshoot with her over the phone, or?
I could not locate it.
I might have her phone number. Let me check. Hold on. Let's see.
I actually have her phone number.
Oh, we do. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, let me,
Do you want to call her, David?
sure.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah, perhaps we can come back to her if we're having difficulties at this point.
Well, someone has just reached her on the phone.
Well, it wasn't going through.
Oh,
She picked up
said
her phone.
she did pick up her phone.
Picked up her phone, David.
It said she was, maybe somebody else was calling her. Maybe that's why.
That could be.
Yeah, maybe we just come back,
Yep, let's,
see if anyone else wants to
Mr.
comment
Cohen,
first.
can you, Ms. Cherry, Kip Cherry has posed several questions in the Q&A, but that would be better, I think probably better posed personally if she is on.
I'm bringing her in.
Thank you.
Actually, I believe I'm just letting her on. She's calling from her phone, I believe.
Ms. Cherry, you mean?
No, I'm right here, but Grace maybe.
Yeah,
Oh, I
Grace,
see.
Grace's phone. So can I move her over and allow her to talk?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
And
I'm
Grace,
sorry. I'm very sorry to have held you up. I've used Zoom a lot, and it's always worked. Tonight it isn't working. Okay.
okay, Grace,
Thank you very much.
Grace, can you hear me? It's Jerry Muller, the planning board attorney. You were not sworn in at the last hearing, correct?
No, I was not.
Okay, if you could, I'm going to swear you in. We swear all the members of the public in, as well as all the witnesses.
Okay.
So if you could raise your
Okay.
right hand. Do you swear
Okay.
or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so sworn or affirm. Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Right. First of all, I want to say good evening and thank you for your patience. My name is Grace Sinden, S-I-N-D-E-N. I live on Ridgeview Circle in Princeton. May I proceed?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I proceed now?
Yes, yes, you may.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. For many years, I served on Princeton boards and commissions, including the Emergency Planning Committee, as well as the Board of Health and its liaison for the Environmental Commission for 13 years. I'm retired from Princeton University, where I was a researcher on drinking water and land use. I have read the packet of recommendations from various municipal departments, including from SPRAB and from Princeton's land use engineer, as well as from the Princeton Environmental Commission and outside municipal consultants, as well as the Watershed Institute. Their comments and recommendations would make highly important improvements to the site plan, and I hope they are well relied upon in the planning board's final decision. My interest in the Thanet property application was raised much earlier than the current application. This interest began in January 2015 when a spectacular fire in Edgewater, New Jersey, at the Avalon Bay large multi-unit housing development caused 500 people to lose their homes. That same company at the same site had another huge fire in the year 2000 when its structure under construction but nearly complete was destroyed. In that fire, 9 nearby homes were destroyed. Also in 2015, Avalon Bay was in the process of building the 280-unit housing development at the former Princeton Hospital site. In addition, Avalon Bay was the owner of a large multi-unit housing development under construction in Maplewood, New Jersey, where a huge fire in 2017 destroyed a nearly finished structure, endangering nearby homes. Fire and building codes cannot be upgraded at the municipal level. With other citizens and relevant professionals, I turn to supporting state legislation so that increasingly large structures would no longer be built with highly combustible light frame wood materials, some call toothpicks, that Avalon Bay and others still use. Aside from the huge fires just mentioned, other New Jersey, aside from the large fires just mentioned, others in New Jersey alone occurred in Lakewood and Princeton in Griggs Farm, where one person died. Fortunately, the Princeton Griggs Farm housing is limited to 2 and 3 stories with separated buildings. Otherwise, this fire could have been much more tragic. As it was, almost 40 people lost their homes at Griggs Farm, with reconstruction taking more than a year to complete. Such combustible wood structures are used in housing for families, for seniors, for students, and in affordable as well as market rate and luxury buildings. The difference in higher rents paid, aside from location, is often for added amenities such as a pool, fancier building facades, higher end appliances, etc., but not in the basic wood construction. Fires in such housing have taken place throughout the United States as the fire codes have been degraded under the influence of those who benefit financially. Firefighters and other first responders involved in the code-making process in a non-governmental entity, which is shocking to me and to other people, cannot compete with those commercial resources. They do not have the same influence. The Princeton Site Plan Review Advisory Board, SPRAB, recommended to the Planning Board, among other improvements, that the features in New Jersey Legislative Bill S2051 be used in the Thanet development for improved fire protection. I strongly support that for this application and for other large multi-unit projects in the future. In addition, in the citizen concerns that arose when Avalon Bay was in the early stages at the former hospital site, some upgrades were made, including that staircases and elevator shafts be made of concrete. These and other improvements that Avalon Bay agreed to should be incorporated in any approval that the Planning Board gives for the Thanet development. I've attached documents which I will eventually send in hard copy. But I think that a large and well-resourced development company such as Avalon Bay, which has had 3 huge fires in New Jersey alone in structures built of highly combustible light frame wood, should move to using non-combustible construction materials such as masonry, rather than sticking to the combustible wood construction in a fire code which has been degraded over the years. I urge the Planning Board members to do as much as possible to protect current and future Princeton residents, both physically and financially. Aside from public safety, such fires are very expensive and severely disruptive to the lives of residents, to the municipality, and to local businesses. Many residents, renters, are not insured for such fire losses, although most developers are, not an equal situation. In addition, a cost analysis shows that there is not much difference to build safely with non-combustible materials, such as masonry, than with wood, lately becoming more scarce and expensive. Thank you for your protection of public safety and the environment to the greatest extent possible, and for exercising your full prerogatives as a key municipal body. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Senden.
Okay. Well, I'll have to.
Louise, can I comment on that?
Yes, please,
Yeah.
Jerry.
Yeah. Ms. Sinden, this is a continuation of a discussion we had at the last session. And people raised similar concerns legitimately. But the planning board really does not have any authority over this. These are all the construction code issues. Now, after we had that discussion, the attorney for Avalon said, well, we'll come back to you and tell you what we're willing to do voluntarily. And I know David Cohen, for example, had suggested look into light metal construction as opposed to wood frame construction. And so hopefully we're going to hear from him. I wish there was more we could do, but there really isn't.
Okay, I have that understanding. I will say about light metal construction, depending on the gauge of the metal, it does buckle under intense heat. So it would depend on the metal or steel construction. Thank you to David, and I appreciate Avalon Bay's considering doing protective items that are they're not required to under the code. And I know the citizens of Princeton will appreciate that too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I stay on my phone?
Yes.
No.
Yes, if that,
Okay.
especially if that's how you're hearing us. I guess I'll ask
Okay.
Mr. Flannery to again summarize, as he did early in the meeting, the steps that Avalon is taking that are above and beyond what's required by code. And also, I guess I would ask you or whoever is the proper person to ask Mr. Flannery to address the suggestion for concrete elevators and stairways.
I can run through the list again, certainly, Madam Chair. So in terms of building code items that are above and beyond what the building code currently requires, one, fire suppression systems will exceed all current code requirements. 3 to 4 story buildings will utilize the NFPA 13 suppression system. Townhome buildings will utilize the 13R suppression system, which is above the required 13D system. Where the firewall separations are required within a building, we agree to utilize masonry firewalls, which are otherwise not required by code, which will extend to the roof of the structure. Also, we have various protocols to be put into place during construction to avoid mishaps, including no open flame heating sources utilized during construction. And the buildings will contain a heat detection monitoring system, such as a Pillar Technologies system, to monitor the entire structure for various items, including temperature, moisture, light, and carbon monoxide. And those are the measures we're proposing.
Ms. Sinden's phone, I believe, got muted somehow.
Yes, that was my fault. I'm trying to fix it.
Okay.
So could I
Yes,
sort of
Mr. Cohen,
reiterate
please.
your question, Louise, which is, number one, whether the Avalon building on Witherspoon Street does have masonry stairway enclosures and elevator enclosures, because I know in our original conversations with Avalon that they had represented early on that they were going to agree to the same upgrades that were put in place at the Witherspoon development. So I don't know if Ms. Sinden is correct in saying that those things were done there, but if they were, I'm hoping they would be done here as well. Mr. Flannery, do you know the answer to that?
To the extent that it's a code requirement, we would certainly follow that.
I don't believe it is, but like
Okay.
Ms. Sinden said, if it was done there, I would hope it would be done here as well.
David is just asking specifically if the fire safety upgrades that were agreed to on the Avalon Witherspoon Street are also being planned for this site as well. And it was my understanding that that was the case. I thought we had that conversation early on. He's not asking about code. He's asking about whether the same measures will be taken here as on Avalon Witherspoon?
Well, I mean, they're different developments, different sizes, different locations, different types of development. We usually do block stairs, elevators, I think, as a practice by Avalon Bay. So, I mean, it's likely a typical Avalon Bay measure. So it would most likely be implemented.
That's
Okay.
that's not tremendously satisfying as an answer. Most likely is not.
We will implement that measure for this
Thank you.
development.
Okay.
And the other question I have is relating to the fire watch that Grace was referring to. And in that regard, I'm just wondering whether you've had any preliminary discussions with the building department. My understanding is that our building department will require a fire watch for structures of this size, and that they're authorized to do that under our local construction site maintenance ordinance. So, again, it's not terribly appropriate to the planning board because either you're required to do it or you're not. But I think you should be aware that that's something. I'm bringing it up more to respond to Ms. Sinden's comment to say that it's my understanding that our construction official will be requiring a fire watch during construction.
Certainly, we would comply with the requirements.
Yeah. Right. I believe that was done for Avalon Witherspoon as well.
Okay. Carrie, have you been able to unmute Ms. Sinden in case she has any follow-up?
No, I am not able to do that. I've asked her twice to unmute herself, and I do apologize.
Oh, that's frustrating. Okay, well, if that happens, we can come back to her. Can we, is Ms. Cherry still a panelist? Maybe we can hear her questions and comments next.
She is.
Okay, I'm right here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So-
Can you activate the
Can you turn
camera?
on your camera?
I don't have a camera logo anymore or graphic. I just have a microphone one. I don't know what
Strange,
happened.
you were on before.
Yeah, I
that's
know. Well, you all know
very
what
weird.
I'm like, so.
Yeah.
I'm sort of building on what Grace was saying and what Mr. Flannery was saying, and just trying to ask if there could be some greater clarification of the firewalls. And I see that I heard now, I didn't hear before, that they go up to the roof. I'm not sure whether that's the roof peak or the beginning of the roof. And I was suggesting that a firewall between 6,000 square feet and footprint would be a worthy location for a firewall, passing a hose stream test. And also I mentioned, was going to mention fire partitions with a 2-hour fire rating between the units themselves. The firewalls would be between.
There you are.
Now we can see you, but we can't hear you anymore.
Okay, here we go. All right, so the firewalls are between clusters of units, whereas the partitions are between units themselves. And so I was bringing up the issue of 2-hour fire rating between the partitions, if there are partitions, and I think there should be, between the units. And then firewalls between clusters of 6,000 square feet in footprint. And I didn't hear before, Mr. Flannery mentioned this time, I just didn't hear it, I'm sure, that this would be up to the roof. And I'm not sure, what a roof is, whether it's the roof peak or the beginning of the roof, and I would recommend the roof peak, capable of a hose test. And then I just want clarification, and I heard better now about the NFPA sprinklers. I would recommend all 13 rather than 13R. And then the fire watch concept. And I would recommend that too. So these are all referenced in Sprabb's report, but they weren't enunciated. They were just referenced as part of the S 2051. And I have taken S 2051 and clarified a little bit the language there where it wasn't as clear as it should have been, actually. So I'm just offering that as in terms of a question on could we have clarification on the firewalls further? And could we have clarification as to whether or not they can include non-combustible partitions, and clarification on the NFPA 13, and then clarification as to whether or not they're going to have the fire watch. That's it.
Well, we'll have the agree the fire watches required by ordinance. We'll implement the concrete stairwells and other measures that have been mentioned are on the Avalon Bay, Princeton. And then, as I had said before, we're offering the NFPA 13 suppression system for the 3 to 4 story buildings, 13R for the townhome buildings, and where firewall separations are required, we'll utilize the masonry firewalls up to the roof of the structure. I think that's the roof line. As well as all the construction protocols.
I believe the firewalls are required to the underside of the roof deck is.
Okay, well, whatever's required. I'm
That's
sorry.
what the code requirement is.
Familiar with the building code.
And the other comment I want to make is that an upgrade to the sprinklers in the townhome buildings wouldn't even be required under the state legislation. So I think that's a little bit of overreach, Kip, to suggest that you need the NFPA 13 sprinklers in a townhome building. Those are buildings that are under 7,000 square feet. They're not governed by the new state legislation.
Well, okay. I think we're going to have to clarify that at the state level, but never mind. That's, I think the footprint concept, though, the clustering as to where the firewalls go, I think that was a question on the Avalon Bay project before as to how many units were within the firewalls. And of course, firewalls between each townhouse unit. So when one says firewalls, I think clarification is due. Well, what is the area within each firewall? It would be useful to have.
I'm not going to comment on that. I'll let Mr. Flannery.
Unfortunately, I don't have a clarification. I just know that where firewall separations are required, there'll be a masonry wall up to the roof sheathing. I guess I misspoke, but the roof line. And these, of course, are purely voluntary measures on our part.
Right.
We don't need to comply with any of these. They're not required by the building code. So just want to put that out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's a good marketing item to do to tell people that you have upgraded over other situations where there have been fires. So, I mean, I think it's a plus for you, a plus for everybody. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry.
Thank you. I think Ms. Senden is still muted if I read my screen correctly. Mr. Cohen, is there anyone else who is waiting to ask a question or testify?
No other hands up. Oh, wait. Here's one, Janet Haru.
Ah,
Here she comes. Hi, Janet.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
welcome. Your voice is a little bit muffled, so if you can just be, sort of close to your speaker, that would be good.
Yeah, I'm not sure where my speaker is. Can you hear me now?
That's better, yes, thank you.
First of all, I think Avalon has addressed many of my earlier concerns, and I am putting my trust in the hands of our public officials on things like noise and light. I just wanted to make a comment on making sure that whatever you ask Avalon to do with respect to the bicycle and pedestrian facilities is it coheres to the surrounding area. I mean, if we have some, nice 10-foot multi-use path and people exit the development and they go onto that path that is all tree roots and a big mess and very, very dark at night. This may be directed more to the town than Avalon, but before you make any decisions about what you're asking of Avalon, again, make sure you have a coherent bike ped safety plan for the whole area, because it's going to be just as dangerous for the inhabitants of Avalon as it is for the rest of the neighborhood. If there's continued speed. That's really my only comment, a plea for pedestrian safety in the broader context of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Yes, that's a really good and important point, and thank you for that. And we did, that is something, that's an objective the board shares. Put it that way.
Thank you. That's it. That's all.
All right.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the rest.
Thank you, Janet.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else, Mr. Cohen?
I don't. Nobody has their hand up.
Okay. Mr. Mueller, do we, Mr. McGowan, did you have something to say?
Oh, I don't know yet. I do have 3 issues I kind of want to raise that I don't think have been covered, but I don't know if you want to do it now or you have public comment. And when it comes back to the board, I would like to, there's some things I'd like to.
Thank you for that prompt. I am hereby closing the public comment period. I think there's nobody waiting to say anything more. So now is exactly the right time to raise any remaining questions or concerns.
3. One, and this is what somebody mentioned to me. There didn't seem to be any mention of backup generators in any of the buildings and whether Avalon would provide backup generators. That was one of them. The second one has to do with amenities and amenities with the affordable tenants. It's my understanding that if there's going to be an issue, because depending on the cost of the amenities, raises in a way can raise the rent, the affordability of the that the tenant's going to have to pay. And if there's some concerns about it, I guess I'm saying they should be, I think they should be raised now or at some point that there should be a discussion between Avalon and, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate body, but that should be raised. And the third has to do with something at the end that came up the last time with what happened on Witherspoon Street. At the end, do the affordability controls automatically renew or not? I know we went through that before, but like a while ago, you went through that and there was some, discussion. So again, I'm going to raise it now, saying that somehow there should be some discussion to resolve that issue, because 30 years from now, I don't know how many of us are going to be around. I don't think there's anything that's written. I know it was discussed and there was a decision, but I don't think there's anything written anywhere about that. So those are the three issues. If someone, go ahead.
Could I comment at least on the
Sure.
third issue? Yeah. I mean, there was litigation dealing with what happens at the end of 30 years. The Uniform Housing Affordability Controls specifically provides that, except when you're dealing with stuff like low-income tax credit programs, that the minimum affordability period is 30 years and thereafter until terminated by the municipality. In fact, we did that in Princeton. Avalon challenged that, and we prevailed at both the trial level and the appellate level. So it's 30 years and thereafter until terminated by the municipality.
Okay, that's all right. Is there a decision? I just worry about, I just worry that, now we'll say it, but, now at sometime later on, nobody's ever gonna remember that, and then you end up having to do it all over again, even though everybody knows that that's the decision.
Yeah, the decisions were not reported, but the New Jersey Administrative Code has that language that I just articulated to you in it.
Okay. Again, with the issue of amenities, I don't know if Mr. Flannery can comment on that or not.
Yes, Mr. McGowan, affordable housing residents would be able to use the same amenities without fees. I believe that's in the redevelopment agreement as well.
Okay.
So you'd be able to share the same amenities.
Without fees.
Without fees, correct.
Okay. And will there be backup generators?
I believe no, I don't think it's a code requirement, and I believe Mr. Bradford did address that issue on the 22nd. There will not be backup generators.
Yeah, I think he left open the question of whether there might be one at the clubhouse.
Right, Madam Chair, I think you're right.
Which it makes a whole lot of sense. I mean,
What
that's
about,
something we'll look into.
They'll have one.
What about the building with the special needs apartments?
That's the main building.
Right, I think it's
They're
part of the main
interspersed
building.
throughout the building, so it would have to be the entire building.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't think there's a backup generator.
Could you install one?
That's it's generally not something that we do. It's not a building code requirement. We're already implementing certain measures that are above and beyond the building code.
Okay, and I'd ask that you consider that.
I also have some comments.
Go ahead, Zenon.
Wait, did Alvin, were those all your questions?
They were. I'm done.
That was 3. Yeah. I mean, you can do 4 too if you want.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just have one in particular thing that I wanted to talk about before, but I guess didn't have an opportunity. I wanted to let other people speak. I mean, I could probably talk about more about the architecture and the sustainability aspects of the architecture, but it seems like that's kind of a done deal. I mean, I looked into LEED for homes, and I guess it's okay. So just to confirm, that's the standard that the building will be built to. Is that correct?
It's the standard that's set forth in the redevelopment agreement. Hold on. LEED and Energy Star standards as required in the redevelopment plan. So whatever standards set forth in the plan.
Okay, great. And it will be solar ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, again, I would encourage you guys to install solar as soon as possible. I think that the incentives are pretty advantageous. I mean, I don't know what the future will be, but I highly encourage the applicant to do that. And also, you know, I had mentioned, you know, zero energy building, passive house, and potentially using a dual fuel heat pump system. I think that there are a lot of, it might have some upfront costs, but you know, it saves money in the long run, and it will help towards saving money and decarbonizing the buildings. But I guess the main thing that I wanted to talk about was the EV charging stations, and I guess we didn't get to talk about that before. I think that it's great that the applicant is you know, planning on installing quite a number of EV charging stations, and you know, overall it sounds good and looks good. Although, if you actually look at the number of EV charging stations that are going to be available to the apartments, it's a little concerning because I did the math. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but if you look at the percentage of parking spaces that are going to be EV, it's I think less than 3%, and we're in the process of trying to pass an ordinance that would require at least 10% of parking spaces be electric vehicle and multifamily developments. And so we feel the Environmental Commission in particular feels that 10% is sort of the standard requirement to be able to provide enough electric vehicle charging stations for a population that size, or a number of the units that size. And so, you know, I would highly encourage the applicant. First of all, I would like to see if you guys would be willing to bump that up to at least 6%. I don't know what that number would be, but I think that there was only like 3 charging stations.
Actually
maybe,
providing 6 outdoor EV charging stations, and also EV outlets in townhome garages, which is actually, it's going to end up providing more than 10% of the available parking spaces available for EV charging. This is 3 times what's required in the plan, and I'm sorry, the agreement, and it's above and beyond what other communities are doing, and above what the market demand is right now, quite frankly, for this.
Right. Well, so that's exactly what I was alluding to earlier. I mean, if you tally up the number of private spaces that you're including, it's a higher number. But if you look at the number of charging stations compared to the number of apartments, it's actually only 3%, which is much smaller. And so, you know, I'm not trying to dispute or argue, but I mean, I think that it would be great if a few more charging stations were added to the apartment portion, so that way, you know, more apartment dwellers would be able to charge. And if you're not willing to at least install them or add the charging stations at the moment, I mean, at minimum, having conduit laid so that way the charging stations could be easily installed and expanded. I mean, you know, I live in an apartment building, and I'm trying to get the management to install a charging station, and they say that it's too expensive. And you know, I'm afraid that, you know, if it's the development is done and a conduit is laid for just those few charging stations, you know, the people that are going to want to get EVs in the future are going to be strapped, and it's going to be limiting for people to charge. So, yeah.
I think we stand by what we're offering. I think we're offering quite a lot in terms of EV charging stations. Again, you know, far beyond what's required in the redevelopment agreement, and what you're going to find in a lot of communities.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious, you know, what was the requirement in the development agreement? Because I don't know.
I think it was two EV charging outlets. I think it's it. Two EV charging outlets. So
well, I guess
we're doing 3 times that amount plus EV outlets in the townhome garages.
Well, that's good. Although I would highly recommend laying the conduit down. I would even go as far as, you know, asking that it be put into the conditions, at least for like a few more charging stations, because I feel like the amount of EVs is only going to grow. It needs to grow, and laying that conduit down right now will not be that much money compared to what it will be in the future. So I'm thinking that that's a very important thing to do.
We disagree with the conduit requirement. We believe we're offering at this point, from what we've proposed already, is more than adequate. And let's be reminded too that this is an inclusionary development. We don't want to drive up the costs, make it such that it's cost generative.
Hey, Peter, could I jump in for a second? I think Zenon is quite correct. We're going to find more electric vehicles as time goes on, and the developments that have set themselves up so that they can provide charging stations for them are going to be in a much better marketing position than those that don't, because if there's more potential tenants that have electric vehicles, then charging stations, they're going to have a problem. So I think that's worth thinking about further.
It's certainly worth raising with the guys in the corner office at Avalon. If you look at what's coming out of Trenton now in the way of climate action, statewide climate action plans and the kinds of things they're talking about having to do in order to meet the 80% reduction by 2050, it involves an extraordinarily dramatic increase in electric vehicles. I mean, it's just everybody is going to be forced to be putting in retrofitting parking lots to put in way more EV charging infrastructure, and it really will end up being to their benefit. They'll save money by running those conduits. And I understand what you're saying, and that you're holding fast to what you've agreed to, and that it is more than is required, and that's really good. It's great that all the people in the townhouses will have the charging station. But I think Avalon will not be sorry if it runs conduit for a lot more of those to make it easier to put more charging stations in for the apartment dwellers in the future.
Comments are noted, Madam Chairwoman, but there are a lot of smart guys at Avalon Bay and smart men and women who have evaluated this and determined that what we're proposing, it fits the market, fits the product.
Are there other, Mr. Texarney, did you have other questions or issues, or are you done?
No, that's it.
Other questions, comments from members of the board or staff? Okay, do we need to go over what needs to be in the resolution, Mr. Mueller? I would love to put this to bed.
I think we would.
And go down and watch TV because I hear exciting things are starting to happen.
I mean, we would have to go.
But we still have to, we have another thing on the agenda, a really important one after this. Yeah. So anyway, I'll stop talking. Go ahead.
I mean, we always go through all the conditions, and that's the proper practice.
Yes.
Obviously, I understand the lateness of the hour. Here's a thought, that I draft a set of conditions that we don't conclude tonight. That I draft a set of conditions.
Jerry, we need to conclude tonight in order, we have our court hearing coming up. We don't have an option. We do need to conclude tonight.
Okay.
I respectfully ask that we run through the conditions tonight. I think we could run through them relatively quickly so that we could have a vote tonight.
What I'm going to do then is go through basically the reports by Jim and Derek, by Dan Dobromilski, by the PEC, by SPRAB, and there's responses that have been prepared with respect to those in various letters that had been sent out by the professionals for the applicant. Now, the first one.
I'm sorry, Jerry, could I interrupt for just a sec? I
Sure.
just remembered that there was a request that came to me today, suggested landscape substitution. I believe it was to substitute green giant arborvitae for, was it the red cedar? And I just want to put that in as a request too. Dan Dobromilsky weighed in on it today and said he thought it was a fine substitution. He said the price is comparable, and I'd like to put that in if the applicant is amenable.
Yes, Mr. Cohen, we have no issues with that. We will happily agree to put that as a condition.
Okay, so it's giant arborvitae, and that's.
If I may jump in.
Yeah.
Can we just make the condition that the applicant works with the municipal arborist and the landscape architect to come up with a reasonable or an agreeable swap, for the buffering along Governor's Lane?
Sounds right.
I think it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, that sounds very.
Because there were other suggestions from our arborist today about Norway spruce and Leyland's. I just don't want to get into a specific, and the applicant has agreed to work with us to put in the proper species of trees.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yes, applicant has no issues with that.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we do have one question that had not been answered. If you want to go over that from Brian, since it's in Q&A, David.
Right. Yeah, there was a question. This goes to the fire safety issues. Question from the public asking whether the possibility of fire-resistant treated lumber could be considered instead of ordinary lumber for the framing.
No, that's not something that's required by building code. And it's not something Avalon Bay would do for this development. Again, we're going up and beyond the building code with the fire suppression system, masonry wall, and construction protocols that I listed in the record previously.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you want me to start going through the conditions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jerry.
Now, the first, there's a set of conditions that were laid out. Actually, it was a response to Joe Scupian's report, and and this was that November 4 letter that we talked about earlier. Well, Mr. Is it Spanowitz?
Scapinetz.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mueller, I don't know if there are certain comments that were acknowledged or agreed to. I don't know if we're going to skip over those and just talk about the comments that are worthy of discussion or there are changes.
Yeah, I agree with that approach. I think that if we can just single out those things that were, not either, no comment needed or we agree.
I'm not sure what you're saying, Louise. You don't want me to review those?
No, I do. I want to just focus in on those things that remain, that were negotiated rather than all, ticking through all the things that they either didn't need to comment on or that they agreed to. Although,
Okay.
I'm sorry, if it's agreed to, it might be a condition that you.
Oh, yeah, it definitely would. Definitely would.
Yeah,
That's a
I'm
condition,
sorry.
but not every comment is going to be agreed to. So I guess maybe go through the applicant's response letters.
That was my thought, kind of using.
And right.
Okay.
Yeah, using the applicant's response.
Sorry,
letters
I'm
as a
sorry if I
basis.
confused things. I apologize.
No, you didn't.
No, not at all.
Okay, so going first through the November 4 letter by Dynamic. So here are the conditions. The stormwater management reports prepared by both Dynamic Engineering and ESE will be revised to utilize consistent data. The existing basins will continue to control the stormwater generated by lots B and C However, the basins will be modified in order to meet the water quality, water quantity rate reductions required. Then Mr. Scorpion has suggested, I think, that subject site be treated to 50% TSS removal and the new impervious portions of the site, 80% TSS removal. This will result in a weighted average for the overall site. Lots B and C will be designed to meet the resulting TSS removal percentages for this proportion of the development. And Peter and our own professionals jump in if you see things differently or you think we need embellishments or changes. Okay, next. And Peter, for your information, this is under section A. I'm now on number 3. The stormwater management reports and associated drainage calculations prepared by both Dynamic Engineering and ESE will be revised to utilize consistent time of concentration calculation data. The minimum TC shall be 6 minutes. Next, the regional basin analysis will be revised to incorporate the Harrisburg Branch 2 model to calculate runoff rates under existing and proposed conditions to accurately represent the effects of the Harrisburg tributary tailwater and identify any additional modifications required for the 2 existing basins. Now going to number 5. The stormwater analysis will be revised to calculate the peak outflows for the 2, 10, and 100-year outflows for the combined project, that is Pearl and Avalon, under both existing conditions and undeveloped conditions. The lower of these 2 values will be utilized as the peak allowable outflow from that storm. The next, a written waiver request, that is from DEP, as we discussed earlier, to omit the groundwater recharge requirement due to the existing soil conditions will be prepared and submitted as part of resolution compliance conformance. Due to the low permeability on the on-site soils, the waiver can be granted under the submission of the requested waiver and supporting documents. Then next.
Mr. Mueller, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I think essentially agreeing to all of Mr. Scoopion's comments. It's just there are clarifications in the response letter, so maybe it's just a matter of incorporating the response letter. All these responses are.
Well, the problem is that I think the board has to hear what the conditions are, and I'm not sure they all have this. Does anybody have this response letter of November 4th? I mean, I think we.
Okay. All right.
If we're going to do it,
point taken.
Yeah, but I'm sure that not everybody has.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it certainly would be easier to just say everything's fine, because it was quite comprehensive, and they basically agreed to do everything Joe Scoopy wanted, and they had said that at the last meeting they would be doing it. And then there was a meeting between Dynamic Engineering, ESE, with Mr. Scoopy, and they established and agreed upon method of addressing the comments outlines within the October 18, 2020 review letter. I'm just going to put it in like that because I don't know any more details than that at this point. Then an operations and maintenance manual will be furnished and submitted following the completion of the revised stormwater management design. Then an updated basin design has been received from the manufacturer. Dynamic Engineering site plans, details, and associated reports will be revised to ensure consistency in regard to invert elevations and sizes. Next, this is 2 under B. Stage storage calculations direct from the basin manufacturer will be provided. Dynamic Engineering can confirm the basin model accuracy reflects the same, so they should do that, and that'll be a condition. The rainfall runoff model of the 16-unit portion of the project will be revised to correctly depict the sequence of runoff and routing calculations. The stormwater management report will be revised to include mapping of the TC flow paths for both existing and proposed conditions. The pipe sizing calculations, including within the appendix of the stormwater management report, will be revised to accommodate the 100-year design storm. And the stormwater management report will be revised to identify the drainage limits within which, to identify the drain limits which will be conveyed through the proposed bay filter MTD to ensure that the resulting flow can be handled by the device. Calculations will also be provided to demonstrate that the MTD will not be adversely affected by trail waters or backwater from the downstream detention basin. Then additional information will be included within the plan set and stormwater management report regarding the proposed rain gardens throughout the site. Then the stormwater sizing computations previously provided within the stormwater management report will be revised to ensure alignment with the associated structures proposed within the plan set. So that's it on stormwater. Then I'm now actually going to use an October 22nd letter from Dynamic responding to the report by Jim and Derek. I think it's by Jim and Derek, yeah.
Jerry, if I may, that's pretty much superseded by the one you just read. So I don't think you need to go through all those.
But this letter doesn't deal with stormwater management.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going
Some
back
of it's
to another
stormwater, some of it's just, acknowledgement for testimony being provided to the board. So, I mean, to the extent that there are conditions, yeah, we should run through.
So
Skip over the stormwater stuff.
I'm sorry?
Skip over whatever is in there that relates to stormwater.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is anything, but if there is, I'll skip over it. The landscape architecture plans will be revised to include the required number of shade trees within the parking area to meet the requirement and eliminate the need for the variance. Site plan B, sheet 6, will be revised to add the 2 additional landscape islands within the parking area to meet the requirement and eliminate the need for that variance. The overall site plan, sheet 4, will be revised to update the maximum improvement coverage percentage allowed within the bulk charts to 75%. The overall site plan, sheet 4, will be revised to correctly identify the lot area for proposed lots C and ensure that this is correctly depicted on both the plans and within the bulk chart. And there's a couple I'm going to skip because they're duplicative.
Well, these are just agreement to revise per the comments in the letter.
Right. I think B, landscape, is just a repetition of what was under 3, the zoning comments, basically.
Right.
And all proposed site lighting will be shielded from residential neighborhoods, residential neighbors. Okay, so there is a surface water drainage. I'm going to skip those. Site plans A and B, sheets 5 and 6, will be revised to show the appropriate site triangles associated with each of the proposed driveways throughout the site. The applicant agrees to resurface the existing multi-use path along Terhune Road frontage and make minor intersection improvements to the Terhune Road and Thanet Road intersection. Site plan A, sheet 5, will be revised to add 1 ADA compatible parking space within the parking area adjacent to building H. Then there is a legal point about the reduction in the sewer connection fee for the affordable units. So we'll put that in. Then a revised EIS report will be provided, which will include the estimated tonnage of solid waste. The subdivision plat will be provided following the subdivision approval and will comply with the title block requirements specified in the section of the administrative code they cite. Next, the required approvals will be sought as conditions of approval. This is from higher level jurisdictions, I assume, Peter, correct?
Correct. Other governmental approvals.
Yeah. Bear with me. Okay. Then the last one is that items listed as current waivers will be provided as conditions of approval, but we address those specifically.
Yes.
So I don't think we have to do anything more on that. And Jim and Derek, that really covers the recommendations you had in your report, correct?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Next is a October 21 letter from Dynamic responding to the traffic report. The site plan will be revised to note, do not enter R5-1 signs at a townhouse egress driveway location. The site plan will be revised to provide stop R1-1 signs and bars at each driveway approach. And Heather, jump in if you disagree with any of this. So, and this, Peter, this is on the traffic impact study.
Right, yeah, I think we're skipping the traffic impact study comment 2.
I was going to put that in. That what it says for the board is that the traffic impact study will be revised if necessary to address improvements at the Harrison Street intersection with Terry Road that would impact the capacity analysis. So we're not doing that.
I don't know if it's necessary due to the testimony.
Okay, Jim and Heather, do you have a comment on that?
This is for comment 2, correct?
Yes.
Why wouldn't we do that?
It's a good question.
Wouldn't that be a natural thing to do, to revise it if it needs revising?
Well, I think this had to do with the development on the corner of Harrison and Terhune.
Right.
Which has not been, there's no design for it yet.
Oh, okay. Right. I didn't realize it was specific to that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so and the municipality is my understanding is taking the lead on improvements there at that intersection.
So I will not include that.
Correct.
Then number 4, certain spaces may have the option reserved for residents who choose to reserve them, including the 6 exterior EV charging stations. The townhouse garage spaces and tandem driveways will be allocated to the residents of the respective townhouse units. That's the end of that.
Right. I think next is the Tom Carmen's October 22nd response letter.
Yep, that's what I have. And he's responding to Dan Dobromilski's October 12th report. The demolition and tree removal plan within the civil drawing set will be revised to identify with a number each tree to be removed to coincide with the tree removal chart. That's one condition. Additionally, any trees to be removed in accordance with proposed basin modifications will be identified on the plan as well. Is Dan Dobromilski participating? Is he here?
I believe he is.
Okay, so Dan, jump in if
I hear you.
Yep, okay. Next, the current proposed planting design is not sparse. That's what he's responding to Dan. We are open to working with you, Dan, to identify the limited opportunities to add additional trees. Then an exhibit has been prepared by our office for review with the planning board to add 4 trees. And so it would just be the addition of 4 trees within the parking areas to comply with the municipal code. And is there an exhibit, Peter, that was introduced?
Yes, I believe it was entered into the record.
Okay. Then they will update the landscape plan set by adding a note to implement root barriers in locations where trees are planted within 6 feet of pedestrian pavement. They'll work with Dan to identify the limited locations to add plantings to better buffer the parking from exterior and residential views. And is that sufficient to cover the Governor's Lane buffer? I would think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The landscape plan should be updated to specify evergreen ground covers within the parking islands that are not currently proposed as rain gardens. The very narrow strips adjacent to the sidewalks will be eliminated by either shifting the sidewalk to create a single larger strip that is of a scale to have a viable plant bed, or the pavement shall be expanded to eliminate the condition. Which would the board prefer? Should I go back over that?
Yes.
Okay. Two options here. There's very narrow strips adjacent to the sidewalk, and I guess that's between the sidewalk and the road. They'll either be eliminated by either shifting the walkway to create a single larger strip that is of a scale to have a viable plant bed, or the pavement shall be expanded to eliminate this condition. I would assume it's the former, given that discussion we had earlier about the shared pathway. Or is this a shared pathway that, no, these are.
These are different locations.
Yeah.
These are
But would
like
you agree?
locations. These are locations where you walk from the parking lot to a unit.
Oh, okay, okay. So,
Mr. Dobromilski, do you have an opinion about
I think
that?
I think it may be I think in different locations, it may be different applications. So I think if you could leave it that it's
Both.
Okay.
or, then
It's
it
both.
Okay.
would be the best way to
would
do
that be subject to your review and approval, Dan?
it. Yeah, for the staff review, yeah.
Subject to staff review and approval. Screening with shrubs, fencing, or architectural screens shall be incorporated for the building utility elements. Work with Dan to identify select locations to add shrub level screening to better buffer the outdoor gathering from adjacent units or parking. That's what I have on that. Does that cover all of your points, Dan?
I had, in one of the comments was some additional shrub level screening or buffering between the recreation areas and some of the residential units. That was
And what number is that, Dan, on yours?
That was number 9 in my report.
Yeah, I think the response from the applicant was they'll work with Mr. Dobromilski to identify select locations to add shrub level screening.
Okay, so I'm going to put in 9 and then I might take it out if I find that it's duplicative of what I just read. Any others, Dan?
And number 10 was the extent of turf grass, meadow grass, and mulch beds should be clearly delineated, and irrigation to establish and sustain landscape, well, has been addressed, so that's not an issue. So just they need to tell us the extent of turf, meadow grass, and mulch beds more clearly.
Okay, but the irrigation part I'll take out.
And then I think it's up next to my letter from October 22nd.
Well, there's one more letter from Tom Carmen. It's with respect to the Shade Tree Commission, but I actually didn't see any conditions on that.
Yeah, I think it's just an explanation, Mr. Mueller.
Yeah, right. And then your letter of the 22nd, right. Oh, this goes to stormwater management. I don't know if this was covered. The applicant will stay within the area of previous disturbance and will not further disturb the buffer associated with the stream when compared to existing conditions. I don't think that was in any of the conditions that I read previously.
Right.
Okay, so the applicant will pursue LEED and Energy Star standards.
Correct. The building will be prepared for solar readiness.
Okay. And then, let me see, the applicant has agreed to include 6 outdoor EV charging outlets. Are those shown on the plans, Peter?
That's right. Six outdoor EV charging outlets.
Right, but are they shown on the plans now?
I'm not sure. I think they may be. If not, we'll add them.
Yeah, so I'll make it a condition, if not on plans. Okay. They'll continue to pursue bike and car share programs, but they won't commit to execution of any operating agreements given the uncertain financial conditions.
Correct.
The applicant has provided 118 bike parking spaces, including 80 covered. The applicant can agree to add 2 more bike racks at the location suggested by the Environmental Commission. And was those buildings B and D, I think?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, and then all interior and exterior lighting will be LED to the greatest extent possible.
Yes.
The applicant will apply for similar rebates through the New Jersey Clean Energy Rebate Programs. I don't know if we really need to put it in, but it doesn't make sense for them to do it, but why don't we do so?
That's fine.
Okay, well, and now the one about, next one is agrees to a bike rack by D and another one by
Right.
B. So we've already said that. The applicant will adjust the planting plan to provide a maximum grouping of 8 to 10 trees of a single variety in a row and then alternate to another currently proposed variety. Dan, is that okay with you?
I guess. I mean, that sounds very prescriptive. I usually don't like to be that prescriptive.
Okay, so how would you word it?
What was, does that sounds like it's coming from SPRAB or something? Is that where that's coming from?
No,
They're,
this is the
they're responding to the Princeton Environmental Commission, but I think it's from the applicant. I'll read it again. The applicant will adjust the planting plan to provide a maximum grouping of 8 to 10 trees of a single variety in a row and then alternate to another currently proposed.
This
Why don't we
was
say,
to avoid a monoculture thing. It was
Right,
to
right.
take up what was proposed to be a whole long, maybe, 30 such and such trees. And EC properly, I think, said that's not a good idea. So
why
that's
don't we,
where it came from. That's maximum.
why don't we take out maximum, just put grouping of trees in a single row, and it has to be subject to staff approval. So it's a little less prescriptive.
That's, yeah, it's just the 8 was, who knows if it's 8 or 7 or 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So I was getting it.
Right. The applicant will abide by all Mercer County Soil Conservation District standards and requirements.
Correct.
Demolition and construction waste will be properly disposed of or recycled off-site to the greatest extent possible. And there already is a Princeton ordinance, isn't there, that 50%, at least 50% has to be reused? Well, that still applies in any event. Okay, then there's another one about the 6 charging stations, and we're gonna put it on the plans if you don't have it. And then the applicant will add 2 additional benches along Thanet Road. And an exhibit has been prepared, and I know it's been entered, by the landscape architect identifying those locations. So that'll become part of the plans. Hold on a second. Oh, okay, this is about the pathways to the Princeton Healthcare Center, the charter school, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to deal with that in the notes because we discussed that obviously at great length. Okay. The applicant makes some suggested changes to the sidewalk pathways for the site. The exhibit is prepared by the landscape architect, identifying the proposed adjustments. That's the end of that.
And I think we're on to the SPRAB memo.
Well, this dealt with the SPRAB memo. I wasn't going to do anything in addition. Hold on one second.
Are you just talking about the next section of your memo, Mr. Flannery?
Yes.
Or
Oh, I haven't gone through that yet? I thought I did.
No, it's an additional
separate
memorandum.
section.
Some of them are no's, some of them are yes.
Yeah,
so-
the only one I had in, and I read them a moment ago, the 2 additional benches, and it suggested changes to the sidewalk.
Right, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, unless the board wants to include anything else.
No, I think that was it.
Okay, hold on one second. Okay, then Mr. Purcell had a proposed condition in an email that he sent to me today. Alternate landscape screening along the border with the Governor's Lane development. So that'll be part of that other condition, which is more general in that sense.
That's what we discussed.
Okay, the only other thing I have is my notes. Let me just go over them. I have a note, I think it's wrong. Porous pavement for 4 parking spaces in the townhouse area. I have a note that that was agreed. That's correct. Yeah, I have a note it was agreed to. Okay, fine.
I think those are shown on the plan.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, they're already shown in the plan?
Yeah,
Okay, then I'll take that out because we don't need that.
well.
Okay, okay.
I'll have to rely on my memory, but I'm just about positive they are. Maybe Mr.
You don't need it as a condition. It's part of their stormwater management whole program, so.
Yeah.
Okay. We already talked about Energy Star and LEED and applying for the rebate, LED lighting, roof solar ready. No, those won't be conditions because we've already covered them. Part of the plans will be Exhibit A13, which is a revised landscaping plan. Getting 4 trees in the parking island. I think I already talked about that earlier, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay. And then just generally working with the landscape architect on the planting scheme, including adding additional trees. We talked about the 2 additional bike racks. The A14, which is also a revised landscape plan, will also be part of the plan set. Okay, so here's the one that we talked about for quite a bit at the beginning. Here's basically what I have. Eliminate the parallel parking on Thanet. Have a 10-foot wide shared path for bikes and pedestrians with markings and signage, and separated by the road by a full height curb. Work with the applicant for sufficiently wide cartway so that emergency vehicles can have safe access to the site. Keep the 26-foot wide cartway, which is now there, if necessary. And if it is not necessary, reduce it and put green space between the cartway and the path. Okay? I think that's where we were on that. And then the affordable, I'm sorry, Peter, did you say something?
I said that sounds about right.
Okay. Then the affordable tenants can use the amenities without fees.
Well, that's in the redevelopment agreement, Jerry. I don't know if we need to put that.
Okay, sure, that's fine. Take that out. That's it. So the other relief is no variances, Peter. There's no waivers either, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's just preliminary and final major subdivision approval, dividing the lot the lot into 3 lots and preliminary and final major site plan approval for lots A and C.
Correct.
Right, and then the conditions. So that's it, Madam Chair.
Someone like to move to approve, Mr. Cohen?
I'll move to approve the application as outlined by Mr. Muller over the last half hour.
Seconded by Ms. Sachs. All in favor, please say aye.
Do we have to do?
Roll call?
Oh, I'm
We need
sorry.
a
Of
roll
course.
call, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. I'm so sorry.
Also,
Roll call,
before-
please. Yeah.
before I do that, I have 2 questions. Mr. Chow and Mr. McGowan came a little late at the last hearing, and I just want to make sure, did you listen to the whole testimony from the applicant? Or did you
I didn't
miss
go.
any portion of it?
Yeah, I didn't go back to that last meeting for that first. I missed the first hour, and I did not go back to the recording.
Alvin?
Same with me.
Okay, so I will not be calling on you. Okay. Ms. Capizoli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Texarney?
Yes.
And Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank
And
you.
Phil and Alvin, I'm glad that you had this family experience of listening to all of that, and really sorry that you were not able to vote on it when the time came.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, I am so sorry that it's as late as it is, but I think we really need to try to soldier on. First, I guess we should thank Avalon Bay and all of your professionals for yet another long evening.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for all your help.
Thanks. We have an important final item, a discussion of an ordinance referral for the Affordable Housing Ordinance AH-7 zone. This applies to 375 Terhune LLC. And it's very important that we get this done tonight, I believe. I don't think we have the luxury of an 11 p.m. hard stop. Is that correct, Mr. Laplace?
That is correct, Madam Chair. We need to get this done this evening.
Okay, so I see Mr. Sullivan there, who's standing by. Do you want to introduce this, Michael, and then punt to Michael, or?
Yes, that would work fine. Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Muller, that you need? Do you need to swear in Mr. Sullivan? Just for kicks?
No, because this is not a formal hearing. This is just
Okay.
a referral.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Michael Laplace.
That's right. We've got 2 Michaels tonight. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, and members of the public. The Municipal Council has referred the ordinance before you this evening to the Planning Board to review and consider it in terms of compliance with the master plan. As the chair stated, it's ordinance 2020-37, which is the affordable housing AH7 zone, which would be set up on the site that I'll tell you about in a moment. This is part of the Princeton's overall court mandated fair share housing plan. As you know, we've been working on many sites throughout the community, and this is the newest one that we're working on and doing a rezoning for. The proposed ordinance establishes the AH7 zone at 375 Terhune Road. The site is located on the southerly side of Terhune between North Harrison Street and Grover Avenue. It is just north of the Princeton Shopping Center and Grover Park. And across the street from the site to the north is Thanet Road and some existing single-family homes. The new zone would allow for greater density as an incentive for the provision of affordable housing units. The AH7 ordinance encourages a well-designed, compact development within an established area of the community in order to create a more inviting, pedestrian-oriented residential experience. The new zone designation would permit 30 residential units, and this would be a combination of townhouse rows and also 2 multi-unit buildings. There'll be attractive green spaces between the rows of townhouses and in the front area along Terhune, in front of the 2 front buildings. Within the AH7 zone, there's a requirement for 20% of all the dwellings to be set aside as affordable units. So for the 30-unit development, this would generate 6 affordable dwelling units. There'll be 24 townhouses and 6 multi-family apartment units. And the 6 multifamily apartment units are broken up 3 per building in the 2 front buildings that you'll hear more about. The idea is that these 2 front buildings will be very much in character with the residential neighborhood that's already established along the Terhune Road corridor. There's also going to be a new road which may ultimately connect Terhune to the Princeton Shopping Center, and it'll be serving pedestrians and bicyclists and possibly motorists, but that's still to be determined. The new ordinance is very much in keeping with the goals of the Princeton Master Plan in that it encourages the development of new locations for affordable housing, as well as the creation of a greater diversity of housing opportunities in the municipality. The plan also calls for the town to look for locations for new development in areas where there's already existing infrastructure and convenient services such as transit and food and shopping and educational facilities. And this location meets all those needs. So we think it's very much in keeping with the master plan. So I'm going to ask Michael Sullivan, our housing consultant from Clark Caton Hints, to go into a little more delated about the site and about what the ordinance calls for at the site.
So I think Mr. LaPlace has given you a very good background for this ordinance. And he's exactly right. This does create a unique approach to integrating affordable housing within an existing context. There's an existing single-family residential neighborhood adjacent to it. And the ordinance was really developed through a series of negotiations with an objector to Princeton's housing settlement back in the winter. And those negotiations resulted in a concept plan, first and foremost. And that concept plan was used as the basis for the derivation of the standards within the ordinance. As Michael said, the ordinance allows for 6 apartments within 2 buildings and then townhouses. The 2 apartment buildings are smaller scale and they are intended to front on Terhune Avenue. The townhouses would be set behind those in a series of 4. I don't know if we can pull up that concept plan while I'm talking about this. It would be helpful.
We sure can.
As good as I am at describing things, I don't think I'm as good as a picture.
There we go.
Terrific.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. So you can see in this concept, the yellow, the left side is Terhune Road, the right side is Grover Park, the top are existing homes that front on Grover Avenue, and the bottom is an adjacent property which is in the AH5 Affordable Housing 5 district. The yellow represents the buildings, and you can see there are 2 smaller buildings facing Terhune Road. Those are the 2 multi-family apartment buildings, and they're broken up in such a way that they approximate the scale of an existing or single family home. so that it would be more consistent with the development pattern of the neighborhood along Terhune Road. Setback roughly, I think 35 feet, but there's an allowance for porches there so that there would be some articulation within the facade and interest and depth in the facade. Also, there would be a front door on each building that faces Terhune Road, which would make it appear as a single family dwelling. The townhomes are arrayed in rows behind that, going back towards Grover Park. The townhomes are served by alleys, which are in between the rears of each. And then in between the fronts facing townhomes, there is a requirement for a courtyard or mews that would serve as passive open space for the residents of the townhouses and create a nice setting. To the bottom of the plan, you can see there's a new road, a public roadway, which would be built that would terminate, at least for the time being, at Grover Park. On the east side would be a sidewalk. On the west side would be a 10-foot wide shared path that would bring people from Terhune Road down to Grover Park. So this shared path we see as a really an extension of the park, hopefully the way it's developed once the details are in. There's no direct vehicular access provided or allowed from Terhune Road. It's all from that new road and the alleys that are in between the townhomes and the apartments like that. This ordinance does require a substantial vegetative buffer between the existing homes along Grover Avenue, or that face Grover Avenue, and Grover Park, strengthening the buffer along the residential side. There's a requirement for a fence or wall to be integrated within that buffer as well. And beyond just the plantings and the architectural element that would be used for buffering, there's a requirement that the buffer be incorporated within the deed as a restricted area that can only be used for visual screening. And to the extent that the visual screening is not compromised, stormwater management elements may be located within the buffer in that yard area. The building heights, the apartment buildings are allowed to be 35 feet in height, and the townhomes are allowed to be 45 feet, as the site tends to run downhill from Terhune Road, providing the 45-foot height for the townhouses provides flexibility in terms of how the roofs are designed, so that hopefully there'll be very usable space inside, and that the buildings can be well designed on the outside without limiting the ability of the architect to do some nice things. This is part of the it's for affordable housing. It's not part of the plan at this time, the adopted housing plan element, but it will be helpful in addressing future rounds or if there are any shifts in the existing plan over time. And it is consistent with the overall affordable housing ordinance with the town, with the 20% set aside for low and moderate income housing. I don't know. Oh, one more thing I'd like to mention about this is that there is a requirement for sheltered bicycle parking or weather protected bicycle parking for the multifamily apartment buildings. The townhouses, as they are envisioned here and as the developer has discussed, would have garages to garage access. So we don't see a need to provide bicycle parking for the townhomes, but for the multifamily apartments, there are weather protected bicycle parking areas required. Those are the high points of the ordinance, but I'm happy to answer any questions if I've missed anything.
Okay, maybe you can stop sharing the screen Let's see. Are there questions from board members for Mr. Sullivan?
No question.
No, okay, then we can move then to, since this is a discussion item, a discussion. Are there any general comments people want to make? I can go straight to Mr. Quinn, go right ahead, and then Mr. Texarney.
Just a question, if someone could refresh my memory about the sidewalk. Is there an existing sidewalk that runs from Harrison the length of? And I'm assuming that these apartment buildings will have a sidewalk in front that connects to.
Yes.
All right, because as you continue down Terhune, I'm trying to envision what the sidewalk situation is. Mr. Cohen, help me out here.
The sidewalk that will be in front of this development will continue to Grover and connect to the sidewalks on Grover. We are also, as I think everybody knows, anticipating a development on the corner lot of Harrison and Terhune that's immediately next to this to the west. And so that development will also have a sidewalk that will connect all the way to Harrison. I don't think that we're anticipating adding sidewalk on this side of Terhune past Grover, but I could be wrong about that. I don't remember what the sidewalk plan calls for.
Thank you.
Mr. Texarney?
Yeah, so I was just curious whether there was any consideration of having the driveway on the top side of the, I don't know, I guess it's not really north, but the top of the site, the way that it's oriented right now, and potentially having the driveway connect to the shopping center. I mean, I guess it would sort of turn it into a road, but in terms of circulation, it would connect nicely, probably with Thanet, and feed it right into the shopping center, which I think could have been nicer.
There was a lot of iterations of this. There's an existing right of way roughly in the location of this roadway. And initially, the impetus was to try to connect to Terhune, to line it up with Thanet, sorry. In order to actually make a usable site, once we would do that, it would chop up the site a little too much. So to actually get the site to work, and we didn't want to run a road directly behind the residence that front on Grover either, because then you'd have a public roadway right behind somebody. So this protects those homes, and it also provides an ability for connectivity with the adjacent development on the AH5 property towards Harrison. Ultimately, it's not clear how this can connect to the shopping center, but those thoughts are with this plan.
Right. So, I mean, as of now, not even the path doesn't connect to the shopping center, or does it connect to? Because like right there is like the baseball field of Grover, I think, or what does it end up?
It connects to Grover Park. As Michael said, we're hoping that we'll be able to connect directly to the shopping center. We're in conversations with the contract purchaser of the corner lot to try to arrange that. But the very worst case scenario, if we can't work that out, we can connect a multi-use path through Grover Park to the shopping center. So there's no doubt that multi-use path will connect to the shopping center one way or another.
Right.
It's a question of exactly what the configuration is and whether the automobile road will connect to the shopping center.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of nice to not have the automobile, but I feel like it probably would have been cleaner in terms of circulation to have that direct connection from Thanet to the shopping center with sort of like a road or driveway that would connect. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Other things people want to discuss? Mr. Chow?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand the 20% affordable. Is it all concentrated in the multifamily building, or is it, are there units?
Yes. Yeah, the apartments in the two multifamily buildings are the affordable dwellings. Presumably they will be rented, but we don't know. And the townhouses would be market units.
It'd be market sale units, or?
The townhouses are for sale.
Mhm.
And the front houses, which, do we have a picture of the front houses, Michael or
Yeah,
David?
I did see renderings. Can you share those?
Really worth seeing what to get a
Yeah,
visual of the
I'm
front.
sorry I didn't queue them up. I will grab them now. Talk amongst yourselves while I.
I mean, the
Okay.
request to the developer was specifically to, as I think Michael Sullivan mentioned, was to have the front houses look like closer to a single family residential, to fit in with the single family residential character of the neighborhood. But they actually have, each one has 3 units in it.
Mr. Quinn?
Yeah, I have a question while Mr. Cohen is doing the AV club about the ordinance in section 5D. It talks about the percentage of affordable units, and I just at one point it says at least this much percentage, and at least, and a maximum of, and I'm just trying to get a better sense of what we're talking about here. I'm glad that they're very low income, at least 13%, and then we talk about at least 50% and a maximum of 50%. So it's not clear to me on this first reading, so it might not be clear to others.
Well, that is standard requirements for affordable housing when you provide it. So 20% of the overall units are affordable. Of those 20 units, 50% are low, 50% are moderate. Okay. 13% are very low, but they are also a component of the 50%.
50% that are low.
That's right.
Okay, great. So that's boilerplate language.
It's standard language that is a requirement for any developer. And it's meant to ensure that there's a balance of units, because the municipality is responsible to ensure that there's a balance of units within the town, that overall you're reaching and achieving 13% very low and 50% low and 50% moderate.
And my ears perked up, or my headphones perked up when I heard that there's at least a possibility that these will be sale units, or did I miss?
That is the plan. Yes, that is what the town is hoping, is that they will be sale units.
Well, then I'll move approval, and we don't have to go any further, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
With that 13% set aside for very low, does that mean that one of the 6 will be very low, or that 0 will be?
One will be.
Okay.
Not 0. It won't be 0.
It can't be 0. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I was thinking that would make a great SAT question.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Mr. McGowan.
Did I hear correctly? All these units are going to be, I call them home ownership units, but they're all going to be for sale units? Or are the affordable is going to be rentals?
No, the plan is, we are hoping that the affordables, that all of the plan is now for all of them, including the affordables, to be sale units. So
Okay, you got a problem. I just say that you got a problem now. I don't think there's enough in a person. This is what it is now. The very low income, that I don't think you're going to qualify a person to own a unit because it's just the incomes are too low.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a very practical point, and I think what we're trying to get here is that the ordinance does not mandate rental housing or rental units. In some of the ordinances that we've done, we have mandated that because that's part of the bonus structure when we have the rentals or not. In this case, it's not required. So to the extent that the developer could have for sale units, that's fine. There's no prohibition against it. But you're correct that the practical aspects of affordable apartments may make that more problematic. But we're open to it, so we're not precluding it.
Okay, that's fine. The other question would be, is this going to be, if you will, a condo association? Are these units somehow going to be related to when they're in a condo association?
There would be an association for this property. We don't know how the regime will be structured yet, but there would be, presumably.
Okay, again, I think you're going to have some discussion, some income discussions about the units and, and the lower and the affordable units there, but.
well, Alvin,
This
there
is-
have been, this is that aspect of it, that it's the specifics are still have to be worked out, but I think there was some thought about, possibly jointly working with one of our community partners. There are a lot of possibilities here, but I think it's definitely given that the preponderance of the new affordable housing that's coming into Princeton is rental. The hope is that this would be that we could make more.
Mia, I have no problem. I'm saying now, we've got units now where you've tried to do it. And there's some things you really have to work out. I don't know. In the end, I'm worried that it's not going to work out unless you're really willing to provide substantial subsidies.
Right.
Well,
I hear you. Yeah.
Okay, there are units that are there that we have already. And it's be great, and I think it's pretty good. Again, it's going to be great, and Lord knows you do need some more home ownership units as opposed to just rental units. But there's an experience there that the town has.
Yeah, not to get too into the weeds, but our affordable housing attorney has said that one of the issues with Princeton's affordable home ownership program was that the laws in the state of New Jersey made it much more difficult. And I guess in the last year, there's been some legislative changes that make it that give us hope that this might be more viable than it has been for Princeton in the past. One can always hope, right?
Mhm. Thank you for raising those. Anything else, Mr. McGowan?
No.
Is there another image, David, that you want to show in addition to the one we see here, or is this it?
This is the front facing Terhune.
Yep.
And I think this is the main thing of concern. I can,
Yeah.
the floor plans, but they're single line plans. They're not.
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to see floor plans unless somebody wants to.
But this does give you a good idea of
Yeah.
what Michael was describing about having the appearance of two single family homes because
Right.
there is just one front door facing the road.
And they're not even mirror images of each other. Isn't that refreshing?
How about that?
Okay.
Just simple.
Other comments from board members? There might be members of the public who wish to weigh in, so I don't want to put that off for much longer, but if anybody's got
Yes.
anything pressing.
We
Oh,
do.
okay,
We have
so-
one member of the public with their hand up.
Okay. Why don't you bring that person in?
Okay, it's Earlene Baumunk. I'm bringing her over.
Okay.
Can you unmute, Earlene?
I'm just observing. I'm not making a comment.
Oh,
okay.
I thought your hand was raised, but
No, I hope I didn't raise it.
okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'm gonna
Sorry,
kick.
I'm just learning.
I'm gonna
No
kick you
harm,
back
no
out
foul,
then.
as they say. So if there are members of the public who want to speak, there's a raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that, and Mr.
We
Cohen
only
will-
have 6 members of the public still with us, Louise. So
Yeah, but you know, they could have forgotten. It was so long ago that I talked about raising hands, although you've said it several times since then. Okay, if there's nobody else, then I'll close the public comment portion. And if someone would like to
We need a,
Discussion.
Mr. Moore, can you remind me whether we need to take some kind of action? We don't need a resolution or anything.
Right, exactly. And it's not that we're approving this.
Yes, I know.
We want to make a determination that it's consistent with the master plan. And if there's any additional comments the board wants to make, it can, but it does not have to.
right. And staff is recommending or stating that, in our opinion, it is in compliance with the master plan.
Yes. It seems that way to me as well. Would someone like to make a motion that we find that?
I move that the board find that it is consistent with the master plan and forward it to council with our comments.
Thank you. Brilliant, Mr. Quinn. Anybody want to
I don't know
say
about
that?
brilliant.
I just wanted to,
What you get when you've been up for 70
Very
hours.
decisive.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I don't want to belabor this or, keep waiting longer because I know everybody wants to go to sleep. But for some reason, something about having that road on the top portion of the site just seems to me like it makes a lot more sense. And it could be changed with the design. I know it's super late in the game, but I just had to put that out there. Anyways, that's it.
If that road were at the top part of the design, Zenon, you would have an entire neighborhood here with pitchforks because they
Yeah.
don't want a road in their backyard.
Exactly.
And
I
we're-
think there could be buffers, but
Well, can I point out a technical point?
Yes,
Where the
sir.
road is not on that parcel. It's on the adjacent parcel. It's a right of way on the adjacent parcel. So if you put it on that parcel, you now have a very narrow strip of land in order to build anything.
I mean, I think that you have maybe a little bit less than what you have now, but I think the design of the site, the building architecture could be different to accommodate that. It could be more dense or it could be a different form.
But
Well,
then
just-
when they develop the site closer to Harrison, you're gonna have to put a road in anyway. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Right, on the other site.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this way they can share it.
We were able to give the applicant significantly more space to build their, to build the development and to move it away from the neighbors there because the town is granting them the rights to use it. So
Okay.
there was a really a tremendous amount of many months that went into trying to get this to get this right.
We
And
need a second.
Thank you,
But-
Carrie. I was just gonna say it in a slightly more
All right,
cheerful
I'll second it.
voice.
Oh.
Mr. Quinn made a motion. We need a second.
I'll second.
Zenon just seconded. it.
Great, thank you, Zenon.
All right.
So do we need a roll call here or will a voice vote do?
I think
Voice
we-
vote.
Voice vote?
I think a voice vote is sufficient.
Jerry said a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
As only you can do.
We need
Thank
an
you,
election update
everybody.
before
This
we
is
adjourn.
Another really long night. I'm sorry it went so long.
That's right. Do we know of any others?
Good job, Madam Chairwoman.
Yeah.
Good
They're
job.
tied.
Terrific.
They're tied in
Madam Chair,
Georgia.
Madam
Chair.
Aye.
See you on the 17th.
Tied in Georgia.
Yes.
3,000
I'm praying
votes.
for my fellow Georgians.
3,000 votes.
Yeah,
Good
go
night.
vote, Louise.
Thank
Keep
you.
voting.
All right.
All right.